Historic Preservation Commission. This meeting on September 15th, 2022. We are calling to order at 5:12 p.m. This meeting is being broadcast live on Glendale TV, the website on Spectrum Cable, Channel 6, AT&T Uverse, and Channel 99. Hopefully you're tuned in one of those channels and you already know that. Meetings are also streamed live in high definition on the city's webpage, glendaleca.gov/live, on youtube.com/myglendale, and on Apple TV, Roku, Amazon Fire devices using a free app called ScreenWeave and choosing Glendale TV for the menu. Meetings are also archived on the Glendale website for viewing anytime at glendaleca.gov/agendas. For public comments and questions during our meeting, please call this telephone number, area code 818-937-8100. City staff will be submitting the questions and comments in real time to the appropriate person for this evening's meeting. Our current agendas are also available by visiting our website at glendaleca.gov. And one item of agenda being changed this evening, if you have the agenda in front of you, like Ben Scully used to say, if you're keeping score, item B, located at 1230 Ethel Street, the design review case number PDR 2107055 has been continued to our October 20th meeting next month. So that will not be on our agenda item this evening. Without any further ado, would we please have roll call, please, Casey?
All right.
Or Jay? Who gets to call roll?
Commissioner Vartanian,
Here.
Commissioner Morgan,
Here.
Commissioner Yurka,
Here.
Cognati,
Here.
Chair Doom.
Here. Excellent. Okay, item number 2. We're looking at reports regarding posting of our agenda on September 15th for our meeting was posted outside on September 12th on the bulletin board of City Hall. Approval of minutes from last meeting on July 28th. Are there any changes to the minutes?
I will not be voting on the minutes because I wasn't at the meeting. I did have a question, and I think I made asked a similar question last time. It mentions a vote and moved by, but I don't think it includes what the motion was.
For Grayson,
Yeah.
motion, well, it says approved, so that's the motion was to approve.
The demolition permit.
Okay.
Yeah, the action minutes are very streamlined.
They are very streamlined. Thank you.
Then I move to approve the minutes.
Second.
Please have a vote on approving the minutes.
And let's see, Commissioner Morgan was absent that
yes.
evening, so Commissioner Cognati,
Yes.
Commissioner Vartanian,
Yes.
Chair Doom,
Yes.
approved 3-0.
Perfect. Moving right along for oral communication. Discussion is limited to items not part of our agenda. Each speaker is limited to 5 minutes. The Glendale Historic Preservation Commission may request or respond to the speaker, but there will be no debate or decision. Casey, do we have any phone calls?
Sadly, I am the phone man.
Oh, you are the phone man. Jay, do we have any phone calls?
All over here. No, we have no calls.
No calls. And no one in our audience submitted the blue card?
That I've seen.
Okay. So without any objection, I will close oral communications. And now is now time for commissioner member comments among ourselves. Any commissioners wish to speak, or shall I address this first with Doctor's House?
Go for it. You can go, and I'll do one after you.
All right. I'd like to bring to your attention of our city a documentary premiering on September 24th about Doctor's House here in Glendale. It's at the Brand Library, and tickets can be obtained at the TGIS website for the Glendale Historical Society. And it will also be shown on Glendale TV at a later date, but please come to the premiere on September 24th and hear the details of the Queen Anne Eastlake House Museum. Okay, it should be very fun. It's a very vital part of our history, and I hope you are all able to attend.
Now, I would like to say, on behalf of the Historical Society of the Crescenta Valley, I would like to invite all of you to our next meeting on September 19th at 7 p.m. at the La Crescenta Center for Spiritual Living, located on the corner of Dunsmore and Santa Carlotta. Its title is, Where Does Our Water Come From? Since we've just been through the drought and we're continuing through the drought, this is on water in Glendale and in La Crescenta. And you've all heard of the saying, whiskey is for drinking, water is for fighting. And so it has always been in the Crescenta Valley. Water here has been brought, sold, bartered, traded, hoarded, and squandered, and it continues to this day. Dave Gould will give us a past, present, and future of where our water is coming from, including the mile-long water tunnels that pepper the San Gabriel Mountains. Dave Gould is a Director of Engineering and Operations for the Crescenta Valley Water District. Some of the water even is filtered down the Verdugo Canyon to Glendale. Again, join us on Monday, September 19th at 7 p.m. at the La Crescenta Center for Spiritual Living, located on the corner of Dunsmore and Santa Carlotta. I guarantee you will be amazed at how Glendale gets its water. Thank you very much.
That's why La Crescenta is only half in part of Glendale and half in the county.
There you go.
The flow of the mountains for water.
I just wanted to ask a quick question about an update on Mills Act contracts for historic district contributors. I believe we've had a deadline. I just wanted to know if we've received applications.
Yeah, we have applications, and they'll be coming to you next month.
Great. So we'll get some in by the end of the year, hopefully. Great. Thanks.
Is that deadline, will we be informed of on the agenda, I guess?
Yeah, it'll be agendized. I have to talk to the city attorney. I think we're going to agendize it as one item.
Okay.
So we have multiple applications, but because it's a competitive process, I think what happens is you'll make separate recommendations. You could say approve both, approve one, approve neither, whichever.
Okay.
Definitely on the agenda. Oh, I'm sorry, I may not be. Microphone? Yeah, I'm gonna do better. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
All right, it was on at least. So
Very good.
to recap, yes, we will be bringing the Mills Act for contributors to HPC on the 20th of October and verify how that's going to be structured. But the goal is to get that to council following month, and then depending on council's decision, we'll be able to write the contracts and get them recorded by the end of the year.
Excellent. Thank you, Jay.
Great. Thanks very much.
Quick question. Has our process on that been finalized?
Yeah, I gave a presentation to HPC quite a while ago now.
Mm-hmm.
And so the basic outline of how this works has been finalized. You'll be reviewing the point system that we award work items points. And then HPC approved, and then council saw this also, the kind of a structure of kind of a formula for how we rank them at staff level. And we present our recommendation based on the numerical rankings for this competitive process.
Right.
And then you'll see what you think.
Okay, great. Sorry. I don't know why I thought we still had some loose ends on ranking system. Are we having a lot of echo in here today? Or? Yeah? Okay.
No, I just have to remember to speak into the microphone.
May I ask a question about that also? Since it's been brought up, I'm just curious. Okay, so then do each of the applications have a staff report and all the same stuff that we normally see for a Mills Act application? Is that right?
Yeah, well,
And there'll be site visits and all that?
Separate applications.
Right.
I believe it's going to be one staff report, but again, I have to verify this with the city attorney. I think what matters is when there's a vote, whether it's your vote or city council's vote, it has to be broken down by the property even.
Okay.
And so my question is, can I make that one agenda item with different motions that they would consider?
So we'll be invited to visit these sites and all of that prior to the meeting, just like the regular process, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's the
I was just
plan.
curious. Okay, thanks.
Mhm.
believe you put it as an item and then break it down like A, B, C for the different areas, perhaps.
Possibly.
Get around that. Any other commissioners have any comments or questions directed to staff at this point, or speak on anything you wish?
None.
Wonderful. Now, on our agenda item, we have old business, but I don't see any old business listed. Jay, is there any old business to discuss?
Nothing old.
Perfect. I love moving right along. New business, item A. Review of recommendations for streamlining the historic district designation process. And our project description is for the advisory HPC review. And do I read the environmental determination, or is that up to you? I just turn over to you, Jay.
You don't need to read it. but,
Okay.
It's in the record.
All right. And I know I had a dozen pages to read through, with each one with the current process and then proposed changes, with the pros and cons for each, which is very fun reading.
Sure it was.
It was.
Oh, good.
And as a teacher, I always look for, and I could not find any grammatical errors, really. Looking for that.
Bonus.
You always
Bonus.
look for errors, and it's your teacher's eye, and no, I didn't.
We have to look to Kathy for the final comment.
Yeah. No, it was,
Okay, great. Well, that's good news. I guess we can just move on and vote on it now? Sure.
Aye.
As long as our grammar's good. Okay, so this is the concept that has been spoken of for a long time. Everyone recognizes that historic districts have taken a long time to get processed. The recommendations in the streamlining report will shorten that time, but there are so many variables that I cannot say how much shorter it will be. It will definitely be shorter if all of these things are implemented. I think I can say it'll be considerably shorter. And the goal is also to maintain the level of public input, the level of transparency. The report gives you some historical background that I'm not going to go into too much for tonight's presentation. But just by way of introducing this, when we started the historic districting process, an ordinance was written that led to a tremendous amount of confusion in the community. And people who supported districts, people who opposed districts, no one really could answer the question, what happens if we designate a district? How do we regulate properties and propose changes within those districts? And the city kind of took a step backward and said, wait a second, we need to fix this because there was so much confusion, and a lot of people were quite upset back in 2004, 2005, or 2003, 2004. So the city revised its ordinance, and we hired ARG to do the historic district guidelines, which are still with us today. And ultimately, the changes that were made in the ordinance at that time are what we have today. So today's process was born in an effort to avoid confusion, to provide clarity, to reduce as much uncertainty as possible. Now we have, what do we have, 12 years, no, 13 or 14 years of historic districting under our belt. The process is well known in the community. It has gone smoothly in all cases, even if it took too long. The actual process hasn't led to some of the rifts and certainly none of the confusion that we had in the early days. So when City Council directed us to produce this streamlining report for your review and then ultimately for councils, I think there was a recognition that we don't need all of the steps that we had in the initial procedure that was developed. And so my recommendations are based on not turning this upside down and changing the entire process, working with what we have, but either removing steps or combining steps, and in some cases establishing some time frames for things to occur. And I think the combination of all of these things is what's going to produce the time savings and the streamlining that council was looking for. So what I've done, unless you have any questions on that background, I wanted to just jump into the recommendations. And what I've done is basically taken the flow chart that is presented to you in the staff report, I'm not going to go through all of the pros and cons, but I am going to go down each line just to mention at shorter or greater length what the proposed changes will hopefully do. And I think in terms of the structure for tonight, asking questions during this, maybe for each line item, will be good. And what I'm going to do is take notes, and Casey will join me in that. So if the commission has any tweaks that they'd like to propose to what's recommended here, or has completely new ideas or anything, we're going to be adding those to the staff report that goes to council. So the council will have the benefit of both the staff recommendation plus HPC's recommendation, and we'll go forward. And I should note that the Historical Society did send out a comment letter to all of you. I believe it was the shortest comment letter we have ever received. and I'm pleased to say that it was fully supportive of the recommendations we're making, which doesn't mean that council or commissioners won't have other ideas to kind of help further the goal of streamlining. So the image I have up on the screen now shows our old flow chart that we created years ago. And as I mentioned in the report, the section of the code 3025.030, which is what establishes the procedure for designating districts, is unchanged since it was written. After we're done with HPC and council, we're going to then have to come back with code language recommendations. It's required that that go to Planning Commission and also to council. We don't need to bring it to HPC. So if you want to think in terms of whether it's something that the commission feels it would need to look at or wants to look at, my recommendation would be to get this moving, that we don't do that. It's basically just code language that gets vetted by the city attorney and then obviously by Planning Commission and council. So the right side of the screen shows the new process, and you see there are still a bunch of steps here. So we're not completely eliminating the process involving public input, and then also certain things that just have to happen by code. So what I've done is just, like I said, broken it down into the individual lines, and we'll just go through this. The application process is proposed to remain unchanged. There's a slight tweak. It's kind of a weird thing that's never come up, but the early days, there was fear that what if we have commercial buildings in a district? What if we have a resource that we've never encountered before? How are we going to know what to do with that? And the code says that the applicant would be writing recommended language for the design guidelines or for anything else. That just seems like an unfair burden to put on the applicant, let's say. Probably not the best place for it. We've only had this come up once, if you remember the wedding cake house on Louise Street. Is a neoclassical revival that we didn't have any other language. So we had the consultant for the historic district actually create new language for that. That's the sort of thing we're talking about. And if we ever were to have a district that included commercial properties, that would be the big step. That would be a big change from what we've got already. So, but otherwise, the application process will remain the same, as will the staff review period, where we look over the application and formulate our recommendation that ultimately we bring to the commission. And this is where we have our first big change, and I mentioned one of the time-saving methods will be to consolidate review and eliminate some steps. So what we're recommending here is to eliminate the first community meeting, which on the surface sounds like, oh no, we're eliminating an opportunity for members of the community to voice their opinions, to ask their questions, to be educated about what a historic district is and what it means to them. Our experience with these community meetings is that they have very limited attendance. And also post-COVID, now that we are having these public meetings where people can watch the meeting on TV, which we always had, but we're keeping the ability for people to comment by phone rather than having to break up their schedule and come in to testify at a meeting. I think we, I don't know if it's going to pan out that this completely increases the level of participation that we have, but the opportunity's there and it's available. So it made me feel comfortable removing the step of the first community meeting. We do need to have the first HPC meeting. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, so those community meetings are really a very kind of informal setting where people can raise their hands and answer questions and things like that, where our HPC meetings are a bit more structured with the Brown Act and all of that. Will they still be structured in a way that the community can kind of, will have an open public hearing where people can come up and without having submitted a card or whatever? It seems like that one benefit of the community meeting is that it's a little more
Ideally,
informal.
there'll be that level of dialogue. It will inherently be a little more formal. Someone in this room needs to submit a speaker card. Someone calling in needs to state their name. We always had a sign-in sheet at our community meetings, but we didn't necessarily correlate who a person sitting in the room was. Back in the old days, we tried to have the community meetings near the district, and then that became such a hassle that we just kind of said, we're going to use our facilities here. And, it's not that big a city, so people were able to join us. So that's,
we may open the public hearing, so to speak, and it may have to be a situation where people, I do want to submit a card, here we go.
In terms of the information that's presented, I think it's going to be exactly the same. The way those community meetings worked was we would welcome everyone. We would talk about what is a historic district. So I think we would do the same thing at this meeting. We would then specifically address what is proposed. Who we have proponents, usually who are in the room. The room was often filled with proponents more than anyone else, but there's always dissent about districts. There's always opposition. Sometimes it's stronger than others. It only once has reached the level where it was an official, formal opposition, and that was for the first district we designated on Royal Boulevard. But those voices are important to hear, and this may actually open it up for people to be more likely to feel comfortable expressing their views that way, especially if they're doing it by phone rather than in person. And then the presentation will focus on, here's the proposed boundary, here's the process that we're going to take this through, and with the streamlining, we'll be able to discuss that. And one of our goals is to make people comfortable with the fact that their voices will be heard, multiple opportunities, and going back to this, both of the flowcharts that we have, each of the blue colored boxes is an opportunity for public comment. So while we have a fewer steps in the current proposal, the ability to comment is largely the same.
I just wanted to add something. So I agree that there would have to be comment cards submitted, but we or the chair can basically decide on whatever format the meeting takes. And so I would think it would be important that people not be limited to 3 minutes, or that they can return if they have another question that comes up. Also, and the big difference between a commission meeting and a community meeting is that someone can come up and ask questions and they don't necessarily get answered. But I think that we would have a kind of moral obligation to make sure that questions are answered as part of the combination of those two meetings. So I think it can address, it won't be as informal as a community meeting, but I think there can be the same give and take. And I think it's important.
No, I think
Yeah,
there's something.
that's a great point, because I recognize that, there's a trade-off here. I think having either no time limit or extending it to a 5-minute limit with the chair being able to grant more time if needed, the ability to have more of a dialogue. That's how I was picturing it. I was picturing this being very similar to that. And I think we can make it work. We have control over how this runs. So.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree too. I'm just going to chime in and say that I think we should be answering questions at that meeting, right? Not just sort of
There isn't always a
taking-
give and take in our meetings. Sometimes there is and sometimes there isn't, but I think that
Right,
more
just because of the
informal it can feel.
formality of,
Yeah,
right,
Brown Act
of
and
the
all that
setup.
Historically, HPC's been less formal
Than most.
of
I-
the other
no,
boards
understood.
and commissions.
What are you trying to say?
I love it. I think it's important. But yeah, and sometimes at the community meetings, someone just wants to have their piece. They say what they think,
Right.
and they don't really necessarily have a question. They just want to say it out loud in front of people.
So Jay, I just also want to ensure that the notice of HPC meeting will be not the regular notice we do, but a mailed notice. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's always a mailed notice. The first notice
Okay.
goes to everyone within the proposed boundary, plus a 500-foot buffer around the boundary.
Okay,
We do the notices now as postcards, but what we've done, and we've even notified most of our community meetings for the last 2 districts were done through the postcard system. We update our website before the mailing goes out to
Yeah.
have all of the information up on the website. So we'll have links to the historic district guidelines, links to the application, links to the whatever the flow chart is for
Right.
the new process. So and then we'll have the web address on the postcard, so everyone
And a QR
has
code.
access to that. We might even be able to put a QR code on there. I'm
That
not
would be
sure.
great.
That's
Yeah.
becoming pretty easy. So, so we're going to do our best to make it as, clear that, here's where you get your information, here's how you can testify. We don't have a ton of space on the postcards, though, so that's why relying on the website is good.
I would like to make a request that we do one of these postcards that I just got
That's what
from the
they-
city
yeah,
for
that's what it's gonna
12:30.
be.
Okay, well, there's a lot of space on here.
Yeah.
Well, not as much. We used to do a 2-sided form that we had to hand fold, hand
Right.
stuff, hand label, which is fine for the Cottage Groves of the world, but not so great for the Selvas
Yeah.
de Lugos of the world. So, so yeah, the system has been working well, and it's consistent with all of our other noticing.
Yeah, I think a QR code would actually be great, because you probably won't be able to get everything on here that we want, so.
Ultimately, it's good if you want to read everything on your phone, but it's,
I mean,
better.
just
and
to
there's no-
ensure that people can get to things as easily as possible, right? People already, in my opinion and from my experience, people already get confused, when you receive something from the city in the mail, and it might be talking about a historic district, and people don't even really understand what a historic district is, so, or how it impacts them, so they sort of toss it aside and don't pay attention. Just as easy as we can make the process for people to be able to get to the information without necessarily having to go to their computer or wherever and type in a URL and try to get there on their own, because it's complicated.
Oh, and the URLs for the city are easier than they once were, but they're still
True.
not great.
Yeah.
So, the other big thing here is something that we haven't done in the past. We probably should have. But if you remember the first HPC meeting, when you take this under, you say, this looks like it has merit, so we're going to vote to move this forward into the process. That's where the design guidelines kick in under the code revisions we made a few years ago. So what we've never done is send out another mailing to the community saying, okay, you're on notice now. The commission has voted to consider this district. From here on out, the design guidelines apply to any changes that you're proposing. And so we're going to, I think I have a 10-day window from the date of the HPC hearing for staff to send out a mailing, which will not be a postcard. It'll probably be a one-sheeter. That we probably will. Oh, actually, we don't have to hand stuff anymore. That can happen. Graphics, but anyways, I haven't thought about the logistics of that exactly,
Yeah.
but I think it's a really important step. And then we can't have the people who will still come out and say, I had no idea.
Right.
But at least we're doing our best to make sure everyone does know. That will only go to the people within the boundary.
Right. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. And the reason we do the buffer, as we discovered with Bellhurst, is there are sometimes in some districts people outside of the boundary who are like, we want to be part of this too. So with Bellhurst, we figured out a way to accommodate them through the survey to at least identify whether or not these extensions might be feasible, might meet the criteria to be
Right.
included in the future. We have another step in here where we talk about possible streamlining for expanding districts. It hasn't really come up that much, but it would be useful. We theoretically, now we have the original Cumberland Heights district designated as 3 separate districts where we just have made up names to just have names. Cumberland Heights itself is sort of a made-up name, but we'll see how that goes.
Right.
So
Okay.
that's a big step to have the new noticing. So is everyone good with that?
I just had one question. With the mailings, with the time element, that's not going to change of the notification in this streamlined process? They'll still be notified how far in advance of a meeting?
What was the last part?
So when we send out the mailings of our meeting, what is the current amount of time between the mailings and the meeting? Or when a community service meeting was being held?
Oh, we don't have a set time. We try to do it so it's not so far in advance that people forget about it, but not so close that they can't figure out how to attend. I think we've usually looked at a 3-week
Okay,
kind of window.
and that
I'd
window
have to go
hasn't
back and look
changed?
at- Yeah, that's not codified, and that's not,
Still flexible?
yeah, it's common sense to some degree.
Okay.
So then before you move on to the next one, at the end of this now combined meeting, HPC will be having our vote as to whether or not we think that there's merit and whether it moves forward. Is that right?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's the
So it's-
goal of HPC. That's
While the two things aren't
HPC's
necessarily related, that's one of the steps that's going to happen in this event.
Yeah, the meeting's going to be educational for the public,
Okay.
and then you're going to weigh in.
Official
It's possible that a nomination will be submitted someday that you look at and say, this is absurd. We don't think we should move forward with this.
That was going to be my next question.
On the original flow chart back in the early days, I had a little segment over here,
Yeah.
vote not to proceed. And with the idea that, if you thought the boundaries were wrong and wanted people to reconsider that and then resubmit the nomination, or you just thought this just doesn't look right, doesn't look like it's going to meet the criteria, and then that decision could be appealed to city council. And if council voted that, yes, we think this should be considered, we would just kick it back into the pipeline through the process. But it's never happened so far, so I kind of didn't focus on that in the new presentation.
So we're just assuming that by the time it gets to us, it's very likely something we're going to be.
Not necessarily, because we might receive it at staff level and say, I've talked to some people informally about districts, and one of them in particular fairly recently, it's like, I don't think you're a district. This is my professional opinion, but I said, if you want to apply, we will move you through the process. So just because, similar with Glendale Register, we sometimes tell people we don't think you're a good candidate, but feel free to apply and we'll see what the commission thinks.
All right, so let's talk about that then. So let's say that happens.
Uh-huh.
Let's say that one comes before us. We're going to have this big community meeting and at the same time our HPC meeting, and we potentially could all be sitting here thinking, yeah, this has nowhere to go, but we're sitting through this huge community meeting presentation before that?
I think we have to honor the applicants and the effort they've put into filing an application. And I don't think we would vote first before giving everyone a chance to be heard, so.
So then the community meeting, in the previous way of doing things, the community meeting happened regardless of, it's very hard to say because we've never had a situation where an application has come in where it's been gray, kind of. They've all
Well,
seemed,
we've had applications where the boundary is tweaked between application and ultimate presentation.
yeah.
But we've never had one where it's like, what were you thinking?
Yeah.
So far, I think people have a sense of, and historic districts mean different things in different communities, and ultimately, council may give us some direction on what do we want districts to be in Glendale. And that's a big discussion that we can't have tonight.
Yeah.
But it's something that may come up in the future.
But we would be, at such a meeting, we would be reviewing a staff report that's basically telling us we don't believe there's you know.
That's kind of what I'm getting
Well,
at.
yeah, in
Yeah,
in
so we would
theory-
have, you know, it would be a staff, I mean, we review individual nominations where staff
No, I
recommends that
understand,
we
but
not
that's what I'm getting at.
recommend.
So we'd sit through an entire community meeting presentation of all of that, potentially knowing full well that we're not going to recommend that this be moved forward. That seems like a sort of a waste of resources, a waste of time, a waste of everything. If we already know basically that something, we don't know until we've had the meeting, obviously, because we could all vote differently on
Right.
the staff report, obviously. But it just, I understand the idea of consolidating. I think it's a great idea, but I might want to really flesh out maybe the order of things or
The community would have access to the staff report in advance too. So I mean, the only thing that would change is just the consolidation of the community meeting with the HPC. And it's like, I mean, if people want to fight it, they would come in here and fight it anyway. It might change the conversation a little bit because it might be more defensive, but I don't think it's really changing the nature of what we do.
No, I'm not saying that it changes the nature of what we do. It's just, we're not normally a part of that community meeting. We're not necessarily not invited to go, but we're not invited to be there. And, you know, our meetings there's a finite amount of time that we have for our meetings. And if we're present for this community presentation, which of course should happen and all of that, I don't know that we necessarily need to be there for that, especially in a situation where chances are this is probably not something that we're going to recommend moving forward. It just feels like a lot of extra steps in the finite experience that we have once a month at an
I
HPC
think you
meeting.
do want to be there to hear what the community is saying, and that could theoretically sway your decision. You might say staff thinks this isn't a good potential district. You may disagree with that from the start, or you may hear things from the community that make you say, listen, I think we should give them a shot. You know, at the end of the day, it may not work out, but part of this is also you're authorizing the survey to
Right.
be done, so that, you know, the commission should feel fairly confident that this is a solid nomination or application, and that you feel it is worth the investment of the city's money to do the survey. Ultimately, city council gets a crack at that also, that we'll talk about in a minute. But I just wouldn't, I get what you're saying about, yeah, there could be a lot of stuff at the beginning of the meeting before you guys kick in with what your role is in terms of moving this forward. It's never happened in so many years, and it's a possibility that I don't think we want to build our structure around the slight possibility that this will come up. And we could also be cognizant when we set up the meetings to not have a lot of items on the agenda for a new district nomination, because we go 2 or 3 and 4 hours over the years for some meetings, and that's
Maybe
what we're supposed to do. So
part of what's established is the community meeting is going to be an hour. We can extend it in a few minute increments. I just the potential of it. Let's put it this way. Let's say we get 5 more historic district nominations in the next couple of years. We are then going to be present for a community meeting that essentially informs people of the process and what it means to be in a district and all of that, which, respectfully to the group here, might not be something that we really need to be present for 5 times. Every time there's a community meeting, explaining the process to people, explaining what it means to be in a district, and do I get a property tax break, and do I get this, and all the various questions that come up that we don't really need to be a part of.
You are all the time.
Well, he is all the time, but that's unfortunately part
when
of the
Lorna
process
just
for them.
volunteered to be part of that.
The
So.
point being is, I don't know that that part of the process is a good use of Historic Preservation Commission time. Maybe that's a day when maybe the community meeting portion starts just prior to our meeting, and then we have our meeting. I don't know that we necessarily need to be a part of that discussion. I can envision us sitting here watching people have a discussion with you about questions related to the process and what it means and all this stuff that we don't make any decisions about. We don't do anything. We're not a part of that discussion, but yet we're here.
I'd have to go back to look at some of the PowerPoints and agendas from the earlier meetings, the community meetings we had. My memory is that we duplicated a lot
Okay.
from the community meeting
yeah.
to the HPC meeting. And they were within a couple of weeks of each other So, and the proponents, you know, live through that because it's their baby. They want this to happen. But it's the other members of the community, especially people in opposition or people on the fence or people who just have no clue what this is about, who want to hear about it, that we owe that to. Your idea of having a pre-meeting is a possible alternative here. And I'd like to hear maybe when we're moving forward with your final recommendations, if the commission thinks that's a good idea, we'll put that in the staff report to council. But it does kind of eliminate some of the synergy or the time savings. And also, I think the synergy of the commission hearing from the community. I think that's really important. And, you know, we tried to convey what we heard at the public meetings, but we're taking, someone speaks for a couple of minutes and we're turning it into a sentence probably.
I mean, I think those people would be invited to stay for the meeting to express their concerns. You know what I mean? I don't know that we necessarily need to be present as these people are forming their opinions based on the conversation they're having with you or whomever else is here. I think they can have their meeting with you, and instead of you having to relay their thoughts to us, they can stay put, address us at the HPC meeting and say, I just learned all about this and this is how I feel, rather than us being present for their development of their opinion. If that,
I'd like to think about it a little more, you know, as we go through the rest of this, but I, over the years, have attended many community meetings. And I really think I find it important to hear what people are talking about, you know, what their concerns are. I think each time, you know, they're always a little nuanced. It's a lot of the same questions, but I think it also helps us understand what we can do better for educating moving forward, just based on, you know, people's reactions, their questions. I appreciate hearing from the public.
I'm not, again,
I might
I'm
be
not suggesting
repetitive.
that we
No,
don't hear
no,
from the
I know.
the public. I'm
You feel
inviting
like
them to
it's
do it at-
repetitive, but I don't mind here. I personally don't mind. I personally don't mind.
Okay.
But that's just, you know, I'm just putting that out there. That's my opinion,
Okay.
my experience.
Mine too.
Yeah,
Okay,
okay.
so we'll move on, but we'll come back to that specific question before you guys give me your final recommendation. Good?
Sure.
Okay, so as of now, the concept of this combining these two steps seems to meet with favor, except for this discussion we just had, so. The next step is the first thing that I'm proposing be eliminated, which is the first petition. First petition, it requests that the city conduct the survey. 25% plus of the properties in the district, the owners of those properties need to sign. And we're always very careful if a property is owned by two people, both of the owners need to sign. And that's been built into the process from the beginning.
Or
And,
5.
Or in rare
Had that
occasions,
happen.
we've
No,
had
but, yeah.
trusts and things, yeah. So that hasn't presented too many problems. Sometimes we've had to eliminate what appears to be a forged signature, or the proponents, not in a bad way, but someone just did it to make things easier. But the proponents often have been able to recapture that house by going back to get the second signature.
When they tell you, let me go in and get my husband to sign, and it comes back and it looks the same.
No, it's not a science.
When he
Everyone's
just
signing
pulled in the
these things.
driveway. Look at that.
The signatures on the petitions, there's a little note that they're signing under penalty of perjury. So we do our best to verify that everything's kind of kosher. But yeah, anyways, the first petition, every district has met this very easily. I don't think anyone would propose a district where they didn't already have an idea that their neighbors are kind of into this. And it seems like this is a step that we can totally eliminate. And then I thought, well, what if, kind of thinking like Chris, what if we had a district where there was maybe significant opposition or some other concern? So if at the first HPC meeting, HPC felt like I think there would be some benefit to having this first petition. We can build that into the code as an option. With the majority vote of HPC, the first petition could be brought in, but otherwise we just skip it. Meaning we would skip straight from the HPC meeting to staff doing the RFP process, selecting the bidder, and just getting into the meat of getting the survey done. So part of this is because we've never had any significant issue getting this, and I think this is one of the holdovers from the craziness in the early days of districting. City doing belt and suspender approach to how to process them. So any questions on?
I mean, if
removing
you
the
think you can get the
petition?
city council to I guess they won't be agreeing to spend the money, they'll just be agreeing, at that point,
There.
Yeah,
we're
the
only
money
getting the
comes-
RFP, they're not agreeing to do the survey yet, right?
Right, the money.
It's just to get the RFP,
Yeah,
got it.
yeah, to
just
get,
to solicit the proposals.
right.
Okay.
So, and then we're proposing two staff-based time goals within this to get the RFP issued, put out in the mail or the email within 60 days of the HPC meeting. And then once we get all the bids, we have an internal process where we review the bids, we set up a small committee of staff members, we have bidding score charts and kind of go through a fairly formal process to see who gives us the best time, the best money, and the best product recommendations. We look at all of those things, and we choose a preferred bidder, and then we rank them. So we'll have the top, we'll go however many bids we have, 1 to 5, we might have a tie. We go to council and tell them what the top 3 were, and we explain why we chose the bidder that we've selected. We don't necessarily select the lowest price or the shortest timeline, but those factor heavily into the decision-making. So this 45-day timeline is to select the bidder, to go through our internal process and select the bidder. Once that is established, we go to council. It's a fairly straightforward staff report. It's more council's agenda is difficult to predict, so we can't put that on a timeline, but we would go to a council meeting as soon as we can once we've selected the bidder, which is what we've done pretty much. The RFP process has taken a long time on the staff level, and so this was one place that I thought we could recognize significant savings with these time goals.
So
And
Jay, sorry, I have a question
Uh-huh.
here. So when you say working toward a 60-day timeline for issuance of an RFP after the first hearing, HPC hearing, and then while taking into account the timelines of other agencies involved in the process, and I know somewhere else in the report we talk about how it has to go to city attorney and finance, I think, or somewhere. Are those the agencies you're talking about here on page 7?
let me jump onto that page.
I'm just trying to get a sense for, I know you're trying to build in, time periods, but we might be trying to get it done in 60 or 45 days, but if other agencies are going to take 3 months to even look at it, we're not going to be able to achieve our goal.
Yeah, and I'm not
Potentially.
sure here, I don't know if I intended to write agencies. It's a process to just get the time for our in-house committee to coordinate our schedules, because and sometimes we have to interview bidders and sometimes we don't. So we have the team do the interview with the bidders, and then we also have the team get together to fill out their charts and come together and talk about
Right.
their thoughts.
Okay.
Agents, I think I was thinking ahead to
Was
when
that
we
a
do have
typo?
involved. That might be a typo. I can't honestly tell you what I meant by
Is it
other
changing
agencies.
the days?
so.
Because that's not really official a typo if he's
No,
changing the date.
he used the word agencies, and I don't know what they're talking
Yeah,
about.
I
I'm
think
just
that-
giving him a hard time.
All right.
I'm not being.
You mean I missed my grammar mistake?
Yeah, it's not a typo. It may just be inconsistent thinking. So, worse.
So
Let's
it's
do it.
60 days, a 60-day timeline for issuance of the RFP, so like putting it out to the world. And then a 45-day timeline for selection. But it also depends, how much time, once it goes out to the world, how much time do we give people to respond? Because, you know,
That's built into the RFP,
yeah,
and I think we usually give about a month,
okay,
depending possibly, a small district is going to be an easier bid to prepare than a larger one. Or we've had, with Neo Gerard Drive, we also asked for someone to get a sub-consultant to look at trees. For Bellhurst, we asked them to consider this second survey, looking at the two areas that might be
Right.
expanded areas. So depending on specific issues with a nomination, a district application could change.
so that
but
doesn't
that's-
really
that's
change, that's always, so that won't change,
Yeah,
that's
that-
always
our-
sort of
that-
been
that
there.
process could expand or contract without us having any.
Okay, so internally, we're just putting a 60-day, it's like instead of taking, and I'm just throwing out, instead of taking 6 months, we're going to take 60 days. And then the RFP process is what it is already. And then a 45-day timeline for selection. So that's really, it's on the outer ends where we're kind of trying to set,
Places where we have a
Limitations.
little more control.
yeah.
And my colleagues are not happy, or not, we may not codify the timelines. So that's why we say working toward.
Yeah,
We
I saw
have to
that.
have some flexibility in case
Yeah.
something happens.
yeah,
So it's not something that we will be held to, but I can honestly tell you, we are really going to try to keep those deadlines.
right.
It's helpful for us, and I certainly recognize the expansion of time for the districts over the years. And now that we have a team with me and Casey working on these things, I think between staffing and kind of these relatively modest timelines, I think it's going to be a big help.
I've never seen an RFP. Are they so uniquely different that it takes a significant amount of time to write an RFP?
That's why it's a lot of boilerplate.
Yeah,
Other agencies, city
yeah.
city attorney looks so
That's
it
where the
was not
60
a
days might
typo.
be.
It was not inconsistent thinking. I was just
So
being
60
forgetful.
days is built in, that's the time for for staff to write it and hopefully, well, like you said,
Get it
hopefully
vetted,
get it back from the attorney by then.
And that could be where there could be
Yeah, hang up. Yeah, okay.
shift in the timeline.
And then just in general, do you find that other agencies, because elsewhere in the process, there will be other agencies, are they pretty quick with turnaround, or do things sort of get held up there? In general, just for our understanding.
We just had a contract, not for a historic district, get so held up in the process that we were entering, surreal world. Things with risk management, things involving insurance, that all the winning bidder has to give us all of their insurance information. That's vetted really carefully. And we've had that be years and years ago, that was a huge problem that added months to a process. It got better. It looks like it's not quite as good as it was fairly recently. So a lot of that part's out of our control.
Okay. Thank you.
And then in this section, I also added an alternative for you to consider in terms of if there was a proposal for a district expansion, it would be ideal to have the consultant who prepared the initial report be given a sole source opportunity without it having to go to bid again to multiple bidders.
That makes sense.
I have to check on that with the city attorney's office, and sometimes there are dollar values where we can't do that. So if you want to just share any thoughts on that, ultimately, I just thought that could be a time savings if it's allowed.
That makes sense to
And before we
me.
go to council, I would do the research
Yeah.
so that we would know in advance what they thought. Okay, so we're good on the RFP bidders recommendation. We then go to city council. for funding. And to date, City Council has funded every application that, or every survey report that we've presented to them. That may not always be the case. We've looked at, are there other ways to do this? Can we have a line item in our budget? Can there be an RFQ where we pre-qualify bidders? None of those look like they're going to give us any savings, and we can't have a line item in our budget. I think I
Yeah.
explained in the report, because we never know. One year we have 0, one year we have 2 applications.
Are we typically still writing for grants to help offset, or is that not happening? Because I think we've done that in the past.
We've done it for one district. We applied for one for another district that wasn't granted because the main grant that we're eligible for district surveys is the Certified Local Government Grant that the State Preservation Office issues every year. And we need to have everything nailed down by their deadline, including, has council approved this? Will this really happen? And so they're on a yearly cycle with the grants, and we're on a whatever cycle with when things come in and move through the
Right.
process. So we haven't had that harmonic convergence lately where we line up, but we're aware of it, and we see if there are other things that we can apply for those grants. We haven't applied for the last few years, though. But yeah, we definitely would look into that.
Something to consider, I
There are
guess.
other funds out there, but usually those are very specific and topical rather than broad and
Right.
this for a context, do this for the district survey. So.
Okay, great, thank you.
In the past, at this stage, how much discussion, if any, really, has ever centered around that 25% petition thing? I mean, you've put in here that you're eliminating that step, and I'm wondering if that's because you have an instinct that council will be fine with that there isn't a...
I do think
Okay,
they'll be
good.
fine with that. I think it's a good step. It's a 3-month, I forgot to mention, it's the applicant has 3 months to
Yeah.
gather those signatures. I don't think we've had people with the 6-month for the second survey ask for additional time on a couple of occasions. I don't think we've ever had anyone ask on the first survey, because it's not that many households for most of our smaller districts. And even Ross Moyne, I think, met that deadline without a significant problem, if I remember
We
correctly.
insisted on meeting the 50% deadline at the 25%
yeah,
requirement, just to make sure that we wouldn't have any problems going forward. So at some level, I feel like having that first petition is important for the proponents, only to really get a sense of how people are feeling in your community, right? When you start knocking on doors, to really get a sense for if you are getting a lot of opposition, or you're getting immediate support, or how much education you're really going to have to do, because
Yeah.
it's a very telling process.
Yeah. I mean, I just wonder if council's going to be willing to spend money without
Well,
knowing there's at least that much buy-in. But if you think that potentially they will, then that's
Well,
great.
I think the fact that there always has been that
Yeah.
level of buy-in is a telling statement. They may have concern about it. And Lorna, to your point, I actually thought about that, because I was concerned, like, we are limiting some of the outreach. There's nothing to stop proponents in a neighborhood from doing early outreach, door hangers, whatever, on signs. A lot of districts in LA do kind of a
Yeah.
lawn sign campaign, just so you visually see every day. That also could backfire and get the no district
Right.
kind of lawn signs going. But there's nothing to say that the proponents can't still do the kind of educational outreach you do during that period.
No, I understand. I think proponents sometimes may not also understand what they're up against. So I think it would also be important maybe to provide proponents with some of those tools or ideas for those tools, to just really understand that you really have to educate your, your neighborhood, right? Like, people really need to know. So just by us eliminating this step to try to make the process more streamlined doesn't mean that the proponents don't still have to do a lot of work.
Well, yeah, of course.
But again, I think, I think even when you're going in as an applicant, people may not understand fully, like, what's required. And I would just hate for us, I know it's in the ordinance, and we've had really good support over the years. Most districts, I think, have come in at like 72, 73%. I mean, I think that's important at some level if we're just kind of squeaking across the 50% plus one line. I think it's important to ensure that, pretty much everybody in the district like knows it's coming down the pipeline.
Since
It's
we're
happening.
Oh, sorry. Since we're sort of breaking out and talking about specific items, I had a couple of thoughts about this, and I think it's great to eliminate the first petition. I totally agree about the necessity of outreach and educating people. I think that signatures are a sort of proxy for education, and it's a lot of, in some ways, busy work. That level of education can be done through other means. And I think one thing you have to do is to encourage applicants as soon as possible to deliver something to every door and let them know what's going on. So in the proposed Selvas de Verdugo Historic District, that happened immediately. We were having a community meeting, and something was hand-delivered to every property. When I did the Neodrera Drive Historic District, because of the lag in time from the first to the final petition, that educational value had disappeared. People didn't necessarily remember having signed the first petition. They didn't remember what a historic district was, what their obligations were. With many people, I had to start over with that process. So I think that there needs to be avenues, and I think applicants can be made very savvy about how this works, and I think one of the ways for them to be made savvy is by coming here and having that combined meeting. But they're going to need to come up with their own methods for sustaining education and reaching out to people. But I didn't find the first petition. I also aimed for 50%. So half the property owners, knew enough to sign, and then, a couple years later, they didn't remember what it was that they were agreeing to.
I would say that just from my experience, because we've both had the benefit of having these experiences, that for Ross Moyne, it was a continuum, right? So I didn't feel like there was a lag or people had forgotten. In fact, when the consultant came out and was, doing the survey, she said she had never, in her experience, gotten such great response from a neighborhood in terms of people coming up to her and saying, oh, are you here, doing the survey? And that we really had a lot of great buy-in. So again, I think it just depends. It's just going to depend on the district and, what people already understand about their neighborhood, also the educational component. So I'm not necessarily saying that we need to keep the first petition in, but I'm just kind of thinking, as we're doing, just kind of thinking through the value, the potential.
I also think that maybe my experience was a function of the difference in the timeline from application to designation, because by the time I did Neodrera, it was 3 years from submitting the application to designation. In South Cumberland
29 to
Heights.
2012.
And
years.
I know it was 5 years for South Cumberland and Casa Verdugo. So I'm very concerned about the way that the time has
Well,
gotten
that-
extended,
that's
and
kind of
that's
what-
the goal. Exactly.
And I would also, two thoughts. This isn't consistent and we wouldn't codify it, but there's, I think, great value in having preliminary meetings with proponents where we're sitting in someone's living room, very informal. That's where I get to tell them, this is hard. You guys are going to have to work hard.
Right.
and here are some people to talk to who've done it before, and they'll advise you. One of my concerns, especially with the petition outreach, is we have no control over what individual people are saying to their neighbors, which is good in a way because it's neighbor to neighbor and there's nice contact, but not everyone is going to be as well informed. And you had a lot of block captains. I'm sure they were all amazing. I'm not saying I've never heard that there's been a problem.
No, but you're right, it's hard because you have to have your core of
Right.
block cat, right? Your people that are knocking on doors have to be well-educated. So that in and of itself is a process, right? So you have your team that's knocking on doors and you want to make sure that everybody's on the same page, that they themselves understand the process and then what they need to communicate, you know, to their neighbors. So yeah, it is hard. You're right, it's hard.
I think it will be better now. We have better materials. Everything's going to be online. We also will have the brochure, which covers a lot of turf. And just for the public and anyone who's listening, we just changed our database system. And I realized that the brochure, which is with graphics very close to being ready to print, had the old property portal in it, which is going to go away, unfortunately. So luckily, we realized this in time, and so we're going to have that. So, but the point being that that little piece of information is a big step beyond what we've given out before, and it's small enough that it's not scary, like giving this whole historic district handbook or something. So I think we'll get a little more consistency in the delivery of the facts and the goals of districting this way. And then hopefully whoever's reaching out to the community, because like you're saying, if we don't have this meeting, maybe there's going to be more door-to-door outreach like Kathy did. Casa Verdugo had that great block party. And there's no reason, because this process still may take 2 years. And
Right.
some people may forget during that time. But if you have events or anything else to kind of rekindle those memories, that's kind of something the city's not going to be involved with, but the proponents can do a lot of stuff.
We have a couple of Senate bills, which are great weapons now too, so that's a huge advantage.
So in the old way, the first petition, the 25% petition, that was only to recommend that the city perform a survey, correct? Those signatures did not count as that person's support of the
Had to
district, right?
re-sign
They had
the
to sign
second
again,
petition.
right? Is there, I guess, if there's pushback from council on this removing of that step and they want to keep some type of petitioning process in that first step that may even provide value, as Lorna has said, is it possible then perhaps to have, rather than have it be a petition to authorize the city to do a survey, can it just be at that stage? There are some people that are educated about these things and know from the second they hear about it that they want to support it. Is it possible that that petition could actually be the final petition and it happens to have this many people in support of it from the get-go? And that it
No.
carries over until the stage where there actually is a petition?
The final petition has to be after people have the benefit of seeing the survey and seeing how their house is described and
Okay.
and evaluated in terms of being contributor or non-contributor.
That's a good thought, but it would be hard to track, I think. Right,
Well, I
just to
mean,
keep track of which
think it's
signatures are
asking-
like the real signatures and which are the ones that are, I'm okay to ask for a, you know, I'm okay to
Yeah,
ask,
well, that wouldn't even be the
but I
question.
still want to know.
Yeah, that
right?
wouldn't even be, the question wouldn't be,
Did I understand correctly? You were saying to have the first petition just be the only
yeah,
petition?
but I understand now that it has to be after there's been a survey.
Yeah, I think the education process is just beginning at that point. and-
Well, I mean, there are some people that are very highly educated on these things. Maybe not a lot, but there's a lot of people that are in favor from the get-go. They don't read anything. They're like, yeah, let's do it. And they don't.
There are a lot
But
of
I understand if
people
it has to be that way.
on
then-
the fence or who've just never really thought about it and they have to give it some thought. And there are some people who are just, whether it's, you know, just philosophically opposed to districts.
Well, of course.
we're not gonna
No
bring
matter of
them
education is
around.
going to change their mind. But if what you're saying is the petition cannot, from a legal standpoint, be circulated until after the survey is done, then that's a moot point. My point is
It's
moot.
not legal, but it's, I think, desirable in terms of the process. I think you shouldn't be asking someone to sign something saying they support something until they have the opportunity to
Yeah.
see every piece of information that's going to be out there.
No, that makes sense. Sorry, I misunderstood
No, I
what
get
you
it,
were
except
saying.
that it seems
Yeah,
like, well, that's
makes
part of the
sense.
problem is having people to sign something
Yeah,
twice.
yeah.
So I was hoping to consolidate a
Yeah,
step.
yeah, no, I see what you're saying.
That's what we're
but-
doing, but we're just doing it the
Yes.
other way.
I'm just afraid that maybe I just don't share your enthusiasm
Well,
that
council
council's
might
going to be
just-
fine saying, oh yeah, we don't need any, but we don't need to know for sure that there's buy-in. We're just going to trust this process.
But it's not I mean, it's not horrible. They might just say, we want to have the first petition, and then we just have to have it built in, right?
Yeah, that step goes back.
We're
Council's
just
gonna-
trying to streamline it, but if they want it,
I mean, I think the fact that there's a mechanism through which an initial petition could be required, which is if the HPC senses enough community opposition to be uncertain whether
Right.
there's support, I think that's helpful.
Yeah, at that stage, council could say, well, we are interested in this, but no, you have to go get a petition. I mean, they could potentially do that, I suppose. They could decide themselves on a one-off basis whether or not they want a petition, regardless of what
They
we think.
could, and we could mention that in the council staff report, that,
Oh,
that's an option for them, because we're giving it to HPC as an option. Like Kathy said, the way I picture it is, it would only be if you sensed significant opposition, and you might really want to make sure that there's buy-in, and you only have one chance to hear that opposition at this one meeting that we've got. Council, by the time it gets to them, well, actually, they're this kind of second public meeting, so
Yeah.
so they might hear that, and we could, so why don't I add as a discussion point that we'll return to, adding the same caveat that we have for HPC for council, if they're not comfortable funding this for whatever reason, whether it's the uncertainty or,
Yeah.
they've never said it's too much money in the past, and by comparison to most other things that they fund, we're like the drop.
yeah.
So that's not an issue, but yeah, I'll add that in the council report.
The other thing that occurred to me, I'm not familiar with historic district processes in a lot of communities, but I don't know of any other that requires 2 petitions.
Not that I've found,
And I
but
think-
one petition is common.
Right.
Surprisingly, some places don't have any petition process, and it's all just the political will and feelings.
Yeah.
But that's why, when I was brainstorming what to do, I was like, do we need to have petitions? And I was like, yeah, we have to have a petition.
I think so.
And I completely agree with that. But I think, if council is a little leery, I think letting them know that some communities have none, but none have 2 might make them willing to go along with this.
Yeah, and the cities that have petitions, it's always the please designate this area request. Okay, so we've been jumping back and forth here, but I think I've covered everything I wanted to say for the, then once council authorizes the funding, we have to write the contract. And again, contracts are largely boilerplate, but there's some stuff that needs to be tweaked. It's not a huge process. So I've put a 45-day goal for getting it from the date of the council meeting to dropping it in the inbox of city attorney's office. That part we have no control over, and it goes from city attorney to finance. That part we have no control over. So we'll just have to, hopefully it's not horrible. It hasn't always been. All right, so we're good there. Once we have the funding and the contract in place, we have the historic resource survey. Each survey takes a different amount of time, but it's built into the process. We have a timeline that's established and approved. We've never had a consultant not meet their date, if I remember correctly. It can range, it more or less depends on the number of properties in the district. We've had 3-month surveys, we've had 9-month surveys. The narrative history is kind of the same for each district, but the preparation, this field survey and preparation of DPR forms obviously adds to the timeline for larger districts. And so what we're looking at here is getting the draft survey back. And once the draft comes in, staff reviews it. and we move forward into the next phase of the process where, again, we're recommending a combination meeting of the community meeting and the HPC meeting for the same reason. So at the community meeting, what we did in the old days is we individually mailed a DPR form to every property. That was a super hassle. We did that for Ross Moyne.
Yeah.
Big hassle. We then started putting more stuff up on the website. We would direct people to the website so they could find their DPR form. Those who actually chose to do that sometimes have feedback. So we've had cases where someone says, the stucco on my house is rough, not smooth. And so we'll actually go back and look at the stucco on that house. And in some cases, the word terminology is used loosely or differently by different people. But we'll fix any errors that people have. Some people will say, why am I a contributor? We'll explain what that means, or why am I a non-contributor sometimes? We'll explain what that means to people. So that happened at the community level meeting where we again had very limited attendance, and then kind of was duplicated at the council, or I'm sorry, at the HPC meeting. So what we're recommending here is, and this, we'll see where you guys go with this. I'm recommending that this be the last HPC meeting. The current system has 3 HPC meetings. This would be the last HPC meeting where you would do 3 things. You would review the survey. You would tell us if you think it's complete. You would identify grammatical errors, factual errors, formatting problems, whatever you find. We will mark up the report with your notes, or sometimes in the past you would submit your marked up copies, and we take that back to the consultant and we just fix everything. In general, this has always been superficial stuff, never real substantial. It's literally fixing typos, hearing from homeowners, fixing things if they need to be fixed, or explaining them if not. So I'm pretty comfortable making this the last meeting where you give us your feedback on the survey, you tell us your recommendation based on this draft survey, whether you think it meets the criteria and the thresholds for designation, whether your HPC recommends or does not recommend to council that the district be designated. And then the third thing HPC would do at this meeting is authorize the second petition so that the proponents can go out on the street and start getting signatures. Right. Yeah, here it says authorization of petition. So, sorry. So then we have second here. Look what I did, Chris. Second petition circulation turns into petition circulation.
So good, Jay.
Yeah, it's really
So good.
remarkable. And then I have a little timeline here. Oh, there are 2 errors in the staff report on page 9. And what I think happened was I cut and pasted the prose. We do not mail, if you look at the first bullet point on page 9, we don't mail to the 500-foot radius at this point. Now we're focused on the district boundary now the district boundary, the consultant may recommend that a boundary be changed. We'll have to figure out what to do in that situation. It's not something we're going to codify. If they felt it was too small or too large, we'll present that to council and to HPC and council ultimately. The other thing, the last bullet under pro about the follow-up regarding the HPC decision being mailed, that's not happening. There's going to be plenty of mailings for the upcoming series of hearings. So that was just a cut and paste error. I apologize.
Can I make sorry.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Are we going to come back and go through these one by one again, or are we?
I'm kind of making notes where there's been a little more
Okay.
discussion.
Yeah.
And
Like,
if I forget something, let me know.
did you want us to have more discussion now, or did you want us to save it? Because I recognize we've been
No,
having discussion, but,
I think discussion now is good. and,
Okay.
Last question in your mind. Go ahead.
so you're going to hate me, but one of the notes I made to myself was that I would like the DPR forms to be mailed out. I don't know how my colleagues feel, but for the same reason, I think It's easier when people get the information than to ask them to actually go and look for it. You know, people have no idea what a DPR form is. They don't really know what is going to be on it. I mean, we might write and tell them, but I think when they just get it, because, you know, I've had people say, oh, yeah, I got the mailer and it said, you know, my house is this or that, or I'm a non-contributor. You know, when you get it, like, you have the information. When you have to go look for it, I think most people don't.
I thought I got mine mailed in Casa Verdugo, but I guess I probably didn't.
Not for Casa Verdugo. You got a link to the website, and you were able to go there and get the DPR.
You're collecting email addresses from all these property owners?
Oh, no, we're doing it in a mailing
Oh, I see.
with the
Directing them to
website
go.
address.
Basically, the owners
No, I'm
have
with
to
her, I think.
self-initiate, right? Like, they have to go out and do some work, which it's already hard enough to get people's attention as it is, but then to ask people to go and do some work, I think they don't do it. I know, Jay, it sounds like it was a hassle because you probably have to get the right DPR form in the right envelope with the right address, right?
Well,
But
in fact, we do.
if the mailroom or whoever it is, I mean, I don't know.
They're not going to, if the commission ultimately votes that they would like council to consider that, I will put it in the staff report, but I will make a strong recommendation on behalf of staff and the concept of streamlining itself, that we not do that. The return, the number of people we've gotten comments on their DPR forms has been minimal at the early days when they got the mailed copy or when they look at the copy online. But we have gotten people responding saying, oh, my DPR has a problem when it's online. If we had a 30-house district, great. I don't think even you have counted the number of properties necessarily. It's not in the application, but I'm assuming, I think you said somewhere it's 800 or 900.
Oh, my goodness.
So,
My goodness.
you know, that is a scary prospect.
No, I
And again-
understand.
So, no, I think everything we're talking about is worth discussing, and I'll bring anything that you vote as a group to recommend to council for them to consider. But I think there's very limited return on the difference between the individual form individually delivered versus the link to the website. And at this point in history, we're also aware of paper use, and you know, we're in general, we're moving to an electronic system. We just inaugurated our electronic permitting system the other day.
Oh, yeah.
And so
How'd that
we
go?
are not accepting paper drawings from applicants for new construction projects.
Understood.
So,
That's, yeah.
yeah, I hear where you're coming from, I know.
So then if we're not going to do that, I would really like to request that we try to develop a QR code that makes it really super easy for people to be able to just get to where they need to go.
Okay,
right?
so we could put the QR code on
I mean, to
the-
Jay's point about that is that's a real tough thing to look at on your phone, but some people are savvy enough to look it up on their phone and then email it to themselves. I mean, there's people that will
Right,
figure out how to get around it, but yes, that,
At least if they can get to it like on their phone, it
go,
might
"Oh."
pique their interest to want to dig in a little further, right? Like if you can just do it fast and just at least see what we're asking you to go look at, or you're being asked to look at, or get some of the information, and then you might, you know, again, just pique people's interest to go a little further.
would it be possible maybe for the city's IT department or for that QR code to land on something where they just have to type in their address and it would pull up their form rather than having to scroll through? I don't remember exactly how I found mine.
Yeah, the
Honestly,
way,
I don't remember I thought I got it in the mail, but apparently I looked it up. But I also know how to look that up.
Right.
yeah, we did it by street. So we grouped them by street, so you would click on your street, and then you would get all of the forms for your street. You would then have to go through, because we didn't want to have a list of, 300 addresses on the
Right.
website that you just are busy
Scrolling
looking
through.
for. So we broke it down by street, and
So they just launched the new property portal. I haven't looked at
no,
it.
they didn't. We're getting rid of the old property portal, and things have to be transferred to the new one. This is a very bad time to think about that. This is,
Okay. But in theory,
these are not as
but in
good as they
theory,
could
these
be.
DPR forms will already be
We're gonna have
in
we're
there.
gonna have a separate landing page for the new district. And so that's where the people will be able to find the district guidelines, the nomination, everything else. And then once we have the DPRs on that landing page that we create for this, it's not going to be a permanent page. It'll get,
Got it.
because ultimately the DPR forms for the districts will go with all of our other DPR forms that currently are on the property portal and are now going to be moving to this thing we call the GIS portal, hopefully. So that's the plan. And that's the one-stop shopping where you enter your address and you get it. But we haven't wanted to do that before things are designated, because how do we track, then we have to start pulling things off the portal if for example, a district didn't go through. It just adds complication.
I thought once a house was surveyed, regardless of whether it's in a historic district, it's got a DPR form or it's got a survey about it that lives with it forever. Isn't that one of the issues we face in South Glendale, is that South Glendale's been surveyed now, and there's all sorts of properties that have these codes attached to them, presumably listed on a DPR form. That's got to stay available to them, doesn't it, regardless of whether we ever make them a historic district?
Yeah, but we put holds on all properties.
Yes.
After the
Big
first
red H.
HPC meeting, we're going to put a hold. Well, it's going to be different now.
Okay.
But we put holds on the properties after the first HPC meeting, but we don't add the DPRs until the process is done. So people, if staff has access to them, so staff can review them and use them to guide design review. If someone wanted their copy, we would give it to them, but we don't want to go through the effort. Technically, when a survey is done, the code given for district properties is, and this is wonky preservation bureaucracy, you get a 5D3 code identified as a potential contributor to a potential historic district.
Yeah.
And then once the district is designated, that code changes to a 5D1. So some of our early surveys, we have 5D3 listed because that's what the consultants put on there, and that was technically what was correct. I've asked people to change for more recent surveys to just put the 5D1, presuming that the district is going to go through. If it didn't, we don't put the DPR up anyway. So, and it's never been an issue. So we definitely do want to wait until we kind of know that everything. For example, South Cumberland Heights, we added a little area that wasn't in the original proposal. City council or someone might have come out of the woodwork and said, well, not a great example, but someone might have been concerned about this appendage that wasn't vetted in the earlier days of the Cumberland Heights district being added. I don't know. So
I don't want to get too far in the weeds on this, but I guess I'm confused a little bit because speaking of South Cumberland Heights, that whole area was surveyed in 2004. And then only a portion of it was made a district. But all of those other homes were surveyed.
Right.
And because they were surveyed, some of them are treated, before they were ever even considered to be in a district, before South Cumberland Heights was even a thought, they were deemed having some type of historical value. So certain changes had to go through your office and things like that. To those properties, for instance, these ones in the South Cumberland or the South Glendale survey, do they not have the DPRs in their property portal file right now?
no, well, right now, the property portal still works, so I don't want to alarm anyone, but it isn't going to work forever because we've completely changed our database system, and the property portal pulls the DPRs from the old database. And the new database can't do what the old one did, so we're moving it into a different place that can function.
Okay.
I had a thought for your question,
So let me rephrase it. Maybe it'll pop back up.
that'll work.
South Glendale's been surveyed for historic resources.
Yeah, so every property that's been surveyed or designated is has a DPR form.
And that DPR form is visible to them, property owners, and to the public or whomever types in the address.
Exactly.
So you're suggesting that the thing you suggested about we don't want to put the DPR forms in someone's folder if the district isn't ultimately going to be designated. But there may be cases where someone's been considered a potential historic resource. That DPR form is going to stay with their address, isn't it?
Yes, but ultimately, the district properties will all have DPR forms in the same database location.
Regardless of whether
What we do is we put the hold on at the very beginning of the process, once you establish that this looks like it could be a district. And then after the final survey is approved, then we're going to put the DPRs in. The holds will remain, the DPRs will join them. And that's how we've always done it. And like I said, they're available for staff, so we can use them for design review. We could share them with any member of the public who asked. Well, they're going to see their DPRs, actually. I'm sorry, they will be able to see them on the website. And yeah, so I don't think it's wise to use the time to put them up on the website until everything's nailed down. And it's not that long after the survey. The last few steps of this process tend to move much more like clockwork than the earlier steps. So there's not a long lag between getting the survey finalized and city council's approval. It's 4 months, 3 months, somewhere in there.
Okay.
Okay, so sorry.
Oh,
So,
and then just so you know, like, we have situations where we have properties that have been surveyed earlier. So for example, the 2007 Craftsman survey identified a slew of Craftsman properties, many of which were in the South Glendale area. When we did the South Glendale survey, that survey superseded the Craftsman survey. The South Glendale survey did not necessarily agree with the findings of the Craftsman survey, usually not thinking that something that was significant, but sometimes the other way. Sometimes things that were given a lower rating or a 6Z, in I think at least one case, were given a higher status code by the survey. So we do keep everything up to date. So for example, if we have, in our historic districts, we have a lot of houses that are already on the Glendale Register. So what we do is we update that form by appending the survey form to it. So someone who goes to that address is going to pull up their Glendale Register DPR form and their historic district survey form.
Okay. So speaking of those craftsmen just now,
Right.
5S3, is that the code where something is
For an individual,
Individual.
5S1 is an individually designated property. 5S3 is for a surveyed,
potentially?
potentially eligible property.
Does a property like that presently in South Glendale have a DPR form if I was to type their address in the property portal? Okay. So
Everything that's been surveyed is in the system.
I guess that's where I get, I mean, I get it. Got it.
Casey?
Yeah, so South Glendale, we put them up when that was finalized. So when the district is finalized, that's when.
That's when they
DPRs
go up.
are up.
Regardless of what ultimately happens with our district. Let's say we don't decide, let's say they don't get enough petitions, signatures on their petition we've gone through the process, it's been surveyed, we've approved the survey, they go out to petition and they only get 30% and they can't do it. All those DPR forms will ultimately get uploaded,
Well,
right?
That's an interesting question. I hope that never happens, but the survey would still stand as a valid survey prepared by a qualified professional consulting firm. So under CEQA, that survey has occurred, and we would have to treat those properties as historic resources under CEQA. They wouldn't be bound by the historic district guidelines, though. But there would be some level of historic
Right.
review.
Well-
It's sort of a catch-22 of California and CEQA, but that would happen.
There are two things to keep in mind, and one is that under CEQA, surveys are supposed to be updated every 5 years for them to still be considered historic resources, and that doesn't happen routinely, and it doesn't happen in a lot of places. So, and also there's always a rebuttable presumption that, a survey would be, a survey for a district that had never been designated, an owner can make a case for why their property wouldn't be considered historic. And, especially if the survey is out of date, that becomes a bit easier. But they're really useful planning documents anyway, because, it's a way to pick up, not just the moderate level contributor, but properties that in themselves may be individually eligible. And one of the things that I think has come up is the fact that because we're supposed to have an East-West Glendale survey, that, for example, the Selvas de Verdugo, there shouldn't be a repetition of that survey. Yeah, it should be, properties should be evaluated for individual eligibility as well. So there will be a kind of longer-term benefit to that survey, and they're going to be surveyed anyway. So that might put your mind at ease a little bit.
It just,
Right, but we are going to be duplicating survey with the East-West survey. We're going to be re-looking at all of the districts.
yeah, so let's say they do their
We
survey
we
for
are
their
not,
district.
we are
Wow.
not planning, and it's not practice among consultants. Historic district surveys are different than citywide or larger surveys. So we're not going to be looking for individually eligible properties in Verdugo Woodlands, just as we haven't in other districts.
For the district
But
survey.
but isn't there a status code for individually eligible and contributor to a historic
There
district?
is, and we use that 5B code for properties that are listed on the Glendale Register and are in a district.
So there's
And
no,
they're not necessarily contributors to a district. I think they always
Right.
have been, but not necessarily.
so there's no code that allows identification of an individually eligible resource and identification of a historic district contributor.
No, there is, but when we hire consultants to do historic district surveys, we're not hiring them to look for individual resources. And especially because when we're looking at things citywide, whoever's going to do the East-West survey, which is now also the East-West North survey, is going to develop a methodology that they apply evenly across all properties in the city. So it would be completely premature to take a little subset of that area and develop a different methodology that isn't going to be employed. It's not even fair to think of doing that, given the timing here.
No, that seems fine to me. I just have always felt that it's a mistake, and that some properties have been. We're getting way out of. we're getting way out of the
way deep
subject
in the
of the
weeds
meeting,
here.
so I'll let it go. But no, that's
But we
okay.
have learned from the Cumberland Heights survey that the properties that were individually identified in that survey, many of which ended up on the Glendale Register, many of which do not belong on the Glendale Register. That survey in particular did a very bad job doing that, and that's the
yeah.
only one that we've consistently done that with.
But we should. I mean, ARG identified individually eligible properties for
I don't think that's
Yeah,
true.
they did, because they emailed me a list,
No, they
and
may,
they
may
had
have,
to take it
but
off.
it didn't make its way into the
Yeah.
staff report or the DPR
No,
forms.
But no, they were asked to remove that.
But I have also spoken to ARG.
yeah.
They don't do that for other districts in other cities. There's a specific goal of a historic district survey that's different. You're looking for different things in a historic district survey. You're looking for contributors and non-contributors. And Survey LA didn't,
Well,
I'm
Survey
sorry,
LA
LA
was
is
a
totally
different, yeah.
So, but anyways, you're right, we are off a little bit. So
So
we
how's our
we have gone
final
over this before, so.
Okay.
historic survey look?
All right, so petition, I assume there's agreement that the second petition is necessary. And let me check my notes if I had anything on that one.
First petition.
No, okay. Okay, so what happens next is two things will happen kind of together. Based on comments from the public, based on comments from HPC, based on staff's review of the draft survey, we're going to compile all recommendations, all corrections, all tweaks, whatever it's going to be, back to the consultant, and they're going to prepare the final document that we call the final survey. And while that's happening, the proponents can begin circulation of the petition asking for the district. Ideally, the corrections that have been made in the past have been so limited that we can get that final done very quickly from the consultant. And for that reason, this is part of the reason I'm recommending that we skip the third HPC meeting, which used to be us saying, they've met all of the criteria, they've met all of the thresholds, and I have a petition with X number of signatures for X number of properties, and here's the percentage, and it's over the 60, or I'm sorry, over the 50% level. HPC's role at those meetings has been very limited over the years. You're basically just check, check, check box, let's move it forward. So I didn't see a ton of value in that meeting. If you're comfortable at the second HPC meeting with the draft survey and you recognize that any corrections are minimal, you find that opposition to the district has been somewhat limited, whatever else. But what we're recommending here is that, again, you have the option, depending on specific circumstances, to ask for the third review. So if at the second HPC meeting, you were kind of concerned about, and here I think it would probably be the level of opposition. If there was concern about the survey itself, you would voice that and we would get the survey fixed. But if, for example, let's say we just made a mistake and hired a really lousy consulting firm and you were not happy with the results and there are significant changes that need to be made, that's a case where I think you might ask for the third HPC meeting. And like I said, if all of a sudden a lot of opposition came up and you just want to stay on top of what's happening, you might ask for the third meeting. But if everything goes as smoothly as it has in all of our districts so far since Royal Boulevard, we would recommend that we skip that.
Assuming that you would like at least update us that it's ready to go to council, or
Yeah, we're
right?
going to still have HPC meetings,
Yeah.
so the timing will be whatever it is.
I mean, and maybe
but-
even at that point, we could say, well, maybe we want to have a, right? I mean, does it,
Well, there's public noticing requirements and all of that.
I'm not saying we
so
would have it then, but we could potentially, I guess you said that we could decide if we felt like we wanted a third meeting. Is it only at that second meeting that we would be able to make that determination?
Well, that's the last time we talk about it. If I'm just giving you updates, it's not an agendized item. So
Right.
you couldn't ask for something.
Well, what I'm saying is, could we say, we would like this brought back to us before it goes to council?
Would you be able to email us the final historic survey and we would have a certain amount of time to determine for the next meeting if we want to agendize it?
No,
No.
all of your
It all has to
discussions
be-
have to be
yeah.
public.
Yeah.
So we can't just have a back of house kind of a discussion. We can see how this goes.
Yeah.
I have trouble picturing what the, if the petition, if they didn't meet the 6 months of the petition, this is something I forgot to mention, I didn't even include it in the report. Currently, city council extends petitions, but I'll be honest, I think when we've extended the few we have, it's been through HPC, which just makes so much more sense to me that maybe I didn't even look at the code, I don't know. But it does seem like that could be an opportunity. If they're struggling to get signatures, then maybe there's this problem out there, and maybe you would want to have that meeting. So I'm going to add to the city council report, with your permission, so when we vote, I'm going to ask to come back to this, that we shift extensions to HPC from council. And this would be a good reason to support that concept. So, yeah, that was, I was thinking all about that and it never made its way into the final version. So that could help. Again, if we're trying to streamline, I think this meeting has been, we've had a couple of pro forma kind of line items in our previous procedure, and this one seems like one of those. So my sense is that the second meeting you're going to know if something's wrong, and it gives you the chance to know if it's wrong with the survey, the consultant, or with public dissatisfaction.
Well, I mean, I guess maybe we won't really know much about public dissatisfaction at that point. I mean, there hasn't been a preliminary petition. There's been the contract, we've had our meeting.
You know,
I mean, I guess there's-
The problem with the petition is we don't know why there's no signature. We can't assume it's because someone opposes the district. It's, in many cases, as Kathy and Lorna know, people can't be reached. Absentee property owners. We don't know, so we always make it clear at the meetings that just because someone doesn't sign the petition doesn't mean if we have 72% opposition, that doesn't mean we have 28% opposition.
Yeah.
Whatever
way
I
around.
just said, you know.
I guess we'll leave it to
Support-
you to determine whether or not you think we need a third meeting to discuss this thing. And I mean that genuinely.
Staff
Like,
doesn't want that burden. That's something that we're gonna build into the code, that's an HPC decision. Staff wants to streamline, and the direction is to streamline, so we're gonna go that way. But I think, you know, the idea of adding HPC as the review body for any requested extension is an opportunity. And at that point, and we could write that into the code, that HPC would be able to authorize the third hearing either at the second HPC meeting or at any meeting requested to grant an extension.
yeah, maybe.
Write that in, and then it's a bit of trial by error, so we'll see as we go once we try this.
Well, this is code, so we have to.
No, but
yeah.
code, and then like we're making recommendations now, we can make recommendations in the future, seeing how it goes.
Council loves opening up the code.
Yeah,
Code can always be amended, so that's.
it can't be
we
like it
don't-
is now.
We don't want to go there, but.
It's not an easy thing.
And I
to
think
do.
by the second meeting, the community has been noticed twice. They'll have access to the draft survey. They'll know if they're a contributor or non-contributor. So when you review that draft report at the second meeting, if there's really no public outcry and it's like grammar issues to fix in the report, a third meeting might really not be needed. You'll know.
They'll have been noticed 3 times actually now because they'll have the letter before and after the first HPC meeting. So, yeah.
And good proponents will be out there gauging, and we have dialogue with the proponents generally to hear, like, if people were saying, God, because we've had people say, oh, we're not getting a lot of signatures on this block. Can we just get rid of this block? My advice is to not do that.
Right.
But there are patterns that people pick up on and see where support is and where support isn't. And
So I guess if a homeowner during the petition circulation portion, which is after we've essentially finalized the survey,
right.
maybe not actually, but we've said, we finalize it based on these potential little changes we've seen. That's essentially what we've done. If during the petition portion, homeowners are feeling like they want to speak about this issue and be heard because maybe it's taken them this long to really get engaged with the process, their only real opportunity to do that after that point would be to go to the city council meeting and do that.
Planning
Right.
commission meeting and the city council meeting.
Okay.
There'll be 2 more public hearings where people can voice. And ultimately, it's most important to voice this at council.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of why it's the final step here. And so. Okay, so with the change to the language that HPC can require a third meeting either at the second meeting or subsequent to any requested extension. We'll move on, and these last 2 steps get very mechanical. We have to go to the Planning Commission. Planning Commission doesn't pay much attention to historic districts. We kind of give them an overview, we give them a little presentation, but the code requires that any zone change go to Planning Commission. And
theirs is a binding decision, right?
theirs
It's
is
still just
advisory.
advisory
Yeah,
also. Oh.
HPC is advisory and planning's advisory, and then we go to council for the final determination. And that is our proposed streamlining process in 2 hours.
Good job.
So
Thank you.
could have been worse, I guess. I told Casey, I said, maybe we'll get this done in an hour.
Yeah.
But that was
Never.
ridiculous. Yeah. that was
Never,
Foolish thought.
Out
never.
of curiosity, oh,
What I could do is, you know,
one question for both of you. Out of curiosity, when you decided to streamline this process, the time involved, what amount of time would be reduced by days or months?
well, that is an impossible question to answer. I like to use the word significant because I think it will be a significant reduction, both in consolidation and elimination of steps and the few kind of staff timelines that we've built into this. There are some uncertainties. When the Bellhurst district was proposed, we were in the middle of working on Casa Verdugo and South Cumberland Heights. There was a recognition that we can't add the Bellhurst district until we got further along in the process with both of those. So we don't know. The nomination for de Verdugo came as this process was coming forward. I believe we want to use the streamlining process for the new district, but we're not bringing that to HPC until we know what council's going to approve.
Okay.
We're planning to go to council next month with this. Yeah, I think October 25th might be the date. Don't write that down. But
I'm writing it down.
write it down. But I say that because we were setting up several things, and that date was mentioned, and I'm not sure if it was for this one now that I'm thinking of it. But anyway, yeah, so I don't want to be
don't know.
coy about it. I can't say.
Okay.
I think those who've been through the process, I think, recognize that this will be a major change. And districting in all cities takes a while. It's
I understand the
never a quick process.
reasoning for streamlining everything these days, with technology being what it was and how the pandemic has changed everything from Zoom and so forth.
Right?
Are these changes in line with other districts nearby, or are we trailblazing a new area here with the streamlining effect?
Every city does it a little differently. I did some research into other cities when I started this to see because originally I wasn't sure that I was going to just streamline the existing process. I thought maybe we'll recommend something completely new. I don't like Los Angeles's process. And Pasadena has a pretty solid process that's different, but still takes time, still has a petition involved.
Okay.
Probably a little less outreach than we have. So again, every city's different. When I worked in New York, they would just designate districts without any petition, just by kind of fiat. And I think that's changed since then.
I'm sure.
But
Okay.
every city's going to do it differently.
It'll be different too.
So I don't know that we can say we're trailblazers, but we're also not following anyone. We've charted our own course, so.
That's good too.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. Do we need input before we make a recommendation, or is this all just for our knowledge?
No, I would like ultimately
Vote?
for you to vote to
Okay.
recommend these changes, and then we'll add any of the other concerns that we discussed. So between me and Casey, we'll try to capture the points where there was a little uncertainty.
Nick, did you want to see if there are phone calls? Is there any public comment?
That is a great idea, and there are none.
Very good. Thank you. That's
Thank
an
you.
excellent point.
We put them to sleep long ago.
Yeah, this has been one of our wonkier ones, so sorry.
That's okay.
That it comes with the turf.
You gotta love districting.
So is it now
Okay,
time
so-
for a motion, then we can discuss that motion with amendments to it, or do you want to propose anything?
What I'd prefer is to kind of just come back to the points of
Okay.
Yeah.
some discussion that, and see if there's consensus. And if there is, we'll either modify the staff recommendations or add it as a kind of a sidebar for council to consider to weigh between the proposals. So the first one that I jotted down is coming from Commissioner Crignati, concerned about HPC at the first meeting, hearing the same presentation about the basics of districting and the ins and outs of the process before they hear from the public, and wondering if we can split that into either 2 separate sessions or an earlier session with the public and then the commissioners come in later. And I didn't feel that I heard buy-in from your colleagues, so but if,
I had a thought about that because, like Lorna, I've attended a number of community meetings, including for districts that were not mine, and there's surprisingly little of that. The kind of here's what a historic district is, here's what the process looked like, and the process part will get shorter. My memory is that it was something like 15 minutes. That it's at most of the meat of it is really a discussion of the historic district that's up for discussion, which we do need to be participants in. And just personally thinking, there's some commissions like HPC and sustainability where I think membership implies a certain level of advocacy. And I think I sort of agreed with Lorna's point about it being important for us to be there for the whole thing. I mean, I think I don't think it'll add that much time to our, an HPC meeting. And to be honest, compared to a lot of other places, our meetings are quite short and canceled frequently. And I think that all of that will be made up by eliminating the last HPC meeting. But I do feel that as advocates for districts and not necessarily particular districts, and for historic preservation in general, it's really important for us as a body to participate. And apart from the streamlining element, I like the idea of this combination HPC and community meeting. So,
Thank you.
any other?
Commissioner Morgan, any input?
I agree with Commissioner Yurka on this. For the ones that we did years ago, like 2010 and the whole bit, it was really good to be there and to listen to people, what they had to say, and they had lots and lots of questions. And I think part of being on the HPC is being there to answer their questions and seeing where they're going on it. So I agree both with Commissioner Vartanian and Commissioner Yurka on this.
Okay.
Commissioner Cagnati, any comments?
No.
No? Commissioner Vartanian, any comments?
No, not outside of the comments I've already made. I'm obviously supportive of combining the two.
Okay.
Okay, so we have a majority now of support for eliminating the first community meeting, combining it with the HPC meeting, and having that be both an educational session and a information gathering and providing kind of session.
And it might be a meeting with maybe nothing else on the agenda.
We've already,
Yeah. Would it be a formal meeting to start, or could we start informally? Because I know it might be very intimidating for a person who might just want to raise their hand in the chair and speak up to come forward to this process. So we could all just like stand out there or conduct a meeting out there.
I think it has to be a formal.
Has to be a
So
formal.
this is
Okay.
exactly the point I'm trying to make. I just don't see how a community meeting fits within the structure of a very formal Brown Act regulated commission hearing. It's just not, I don't see you explaining something and then someone just wants to ask a simple question, raising their hand, and us having to open the public hearing and invite them to the dais and have them fill out their card, and all they want to know is, do I get a tax break on this? Like, I just don't feel like the system is, our meetings are not set up for that kind of engagement with people.
The mailing that goes out does have staff contact information, so staff could be contacted, a phone call, more casual. Proponents, I don't think we can codify that proponents have to do X, Y, or Z, although I guess we did codify that they distribute petitions. But proponents could have that kind of engagement in a community meeting, block party, I don't know. Staff could be invited to participate in something like that.
So I guess,
We would.
how do you see this, how do you see the public noticing of this meeting being presented?
It's going to be the green postcard,
No, but like
With-
okay, sorry, go ahead.
with the meeting date and time, the methods of communication, whether via phone, writing, in-person participation. There'll be links to information on the website. There'll be the staff contact information. You're totally right. This is going to be more bureaucratic than the community meeting. The community meetings have been very sparsely attended when you look at the number of people in the room, and then you minus out the proponents who kind of are in it pretty deeply already. And then you look at the number of people in the community, the potential number that could be there. It hasn't seemed to me to have a lot of bang for buck, but
So
you're right, there is an intimidation factor here, a phone call, maybe not so much.
You know, and sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but I can't remember the last community meeting I went to. It must have been one of the Cumberlands. I do recall that for Ross Moyne, we had a full house, a lot of people. I would say probably about 60. Yeah, we were over at GWP in that room, and there was very robust discussion, right? But that was also earlier when, you know, we didn't have that many districts in place. It was kind of new. I mean, now it's more like people are aware of districts. They want to jump on the bandwagon. They want to be in a district. Again, you would know more. I haven't been, you know, you
Full
forgot.
house,
Yeah,
yeah.
no, we did. We had a really full house. So,
I mean, I guess I'm just struggling to see, I'm trying to envision how that commission hearing is going to actually play out. And I'm having a hard time picturing those two types and styles of engagement with the public marrying themselves into this type of a structure. I'm having a hard time, to the point where I feel like maybe you don't even mention that it's any kind of a community meeting. Maybe it's just agendized as the presentation of the such and such historic district petition and leave it at that. And people can come to that meeting and be a part of the hearing. But setting up some kind of potential for there to be just an open forum in the middle of a very structured thing seems very challenging to me.
Well, the way it's presented here, and I don't know, Jay, if this is your final, but it is first HPC preliminary review. There's not the language of the community meeting, the way that you've melded them together. You know, just with the community meetings I've attended, they're definitely less formal, but they're not conversations. They're Q&As. I mean, they have some of this same structure. You know, as Jay does a presentation, and one by one, people would ask questions of Jay. Like it's not people sitting around in a circle and just chit-chatting amongst themselves. Maybe it was back in your day, but I remember from the Niobrara community meetings and the ones I went to for Casa Verdugo and South Cumberland, I think they were combined, maybe, or one of them was. I just don't see this as the formality is a huge obstacle. It's kind of an annoyance having to fill out the card. I will point out that even in an HPC meeting, no one is required to give their name. You can get up and just say, I want to speak on this issue. You have to fill out a card, but you don't need to. I don't think on a card you even are required.
Usually all of the boards and commissions ask for names.
But you're not required to provide it.
Maybe not.
You're not.
you are even at city council. I mean, you're not at a
You're not
public hearing,
required
you're
to
not required.
give your address. That's
Yeah.
for sure.
I guess
It would be, it would depend on the chair and the introduction to the meeting and how the meeting is very organized. Having done many community service meetings, whether it be the YMCA or especially with churches, it's all informal, and it's how you set the tone and the climate when you structure it. And I agree with Lorna that the agenda should be streamlined for nights like that, just anticipation of whatever happens. And with what Catherine said, by having that one meeting, we prohibit a meeting in the future. And so I think it all depends on our first attempt at this, and we'll iron out the kinks as we go. But people do like structure, and some will love, I want to fill out that card. I want to be heard. I want to be recognized. I want my voice heard. And believe it or not, you might be surprised. People will like it more than we think.
Well, and I think there probably is something to be said for that structure so that it doesn't become too contentious and out of control, right? I mean, a lot of times, I think people who come to those meetings, people come because they're interested, but probably those that speak up more are the ones that have concerns, right? They might be opposed.
And with the other opportunities of
Which-
phone calls and emails and
good.
so
Which is
forth.
good, but by
But
the way,
we want them to-
but without the community meeting, they have that opportunity in the HPC portion of that meeting.
They can talk
have that.
about it,
So
yeah.
let me ask you this. I'm sorry to get in the weeds on this, but I can see the potential for this to be something that is, in theory, really easy to do. So let me ask you this. We're going to agendize the presentation of what a historic district is, right? That will be agenda item 1A. Or whatever, 4A by the time we get down to it. And then the chair will open it up we'll open the public hearing, and that will then be the public's opportunity to come to you and say, okay, I have this question. Will this affect my property taxes? I have a question. Does this mean I can't change my paint colors? I have a question. I want to do an addition on the back of my house, and da-da-da-da. So that's how that would happen. You would present the concept of historic districts to people, because that's what the community meeting is about. Has nothing to do with the specific district that we're talking about, just a general informational session on historic districts. Chair would open the public hearing. People would fill out a card if they had a question. They'd give you the card. They'd ask their question, and we would just get through it. Not in a circle formation, just basically people raising their hands, but then filling out a card and coming up. Then we would wrap that discussion up. There's nothing for us to vote on at that point. It's just, how does an agenda item work like that? That's just specifically how that is. It's, if we're not voting on anything, is that an agenda item? Can there be an agenda item that's just like that?
Ultimately, and I haven't thought this through at the level you're presenting now. I picture this being a single agenda item. I see it will be a staff presentation to the community, but you are here also, so it's like a typical staff presentation. We talk about districting broadly. We talk about districting specifically to whatever the nomination is. We make a big point of telling people what their rights are and what the opportunities are. You have Mills Act potential. You can do what you want if we can't see it from the street. You can do whatever you want on the inside. We kind of make all of that stuff very clear to try to cut off some of those concerns up front. People will still raise them, but whatever. I almost think that I don't have as much concern as you do about this meeting being so different from the community meeting. In fact, I would recommend that me or another staff person be the point person to answer questions.
Oh, yeah,
because
you're
we
going to be here.
probably
You're not escaping
our
this.
heads better than you do individually. Obviously, you would weigh in on it, but it's the opportunity for you to hear what the community has to say, to gauge your sense. And this does two things. It helps you make a determination at the end of the meeting or at the end of this item whether or not to move forward. And so that's going to be based on the quality and content of the application. It's going to be based on the level of support you gauge from whoever shows up. And, the reality of public testimony and hearings is, in all cases, a very small minority of people are the ones who are heard, who help the decision makers make their decisions. It's how it works. There's an obligation for people who are very concerned about this. If it's truly an issue, they need to come and let us know, whether it's at a community meeting or not. I think it's better for them to do that in front of you rather than in front of me and Casey sitting in a meeting room somewhere where we're just, like I said, we're trying to relay their more complex ideas and distill it down into a staff report where we say we heard someone who's concerned that they can't paint their house whatever color they want.
I guess that right there, I would not have expected that would have been exactly how it goes. I would have thought you would say to them, if you have that concern, you really should come to the HPC meeting on this date and or when that gets announced. I mean, I wouldn't expect that. I guess I don't want there to be a presumption that I'm saying I don't want to hear what people have to say. Of course I do. I just think that there's a more appropriate and formal place for that to happen, which is during an HPC meeting that doesn't necessarily have the nuts and bolts question and answer portion that like he just said, you're going to be running this portion of the meeting, Jay, then why are we here? I'm certainly not going to interrupt you answering someone's logistical question. That's,
But if, you know,
I don't
will.
want to be here for that.
Yeah, Kathy will.
The two reasons for that would be the public.
You know, I may not fully answer a question. I may, you know, it's hard to keep everything going and in your head. And so you are there, I'm here, Casey's here. We're going to be a team kind of helping the community understand what's going on. I do think having a point person is probably the best way to do that. And I do think, you know, the tone we have, you know, even right now, we have very conversational, very friendly, first name basis kind of relationship that you don't see with some of the other boards and commissions, and certainly not council. And I appreciate that, and I think it makes us a better environment for the kind of dialogue we're hoping to have with the community. And we have the power to set the stage. So the idea of not having speaker time limits, the idea of speakers asking questions and expecting answers, because you go to council meetings and even our meetings on the rare occasion where someone comes in, no one from the dais has to say anything. Sometimes it's just, we take this under advisement, thank you for your comments, goodbye. We're not going to do that in this situation. So we do have the ability to make it less, you know, bureaucratic, less.
I mean, if you think within the confines of the Brown Act and all these rules that we constantly have to follow in our meetings, if you think that that's actually possible, then I guess I'm fine with it. I just feel like our meetings are very strictly regulated with certain rules, and I could
Right,
see
but
that
the
us trying
Brown-
to sort of.
This won't be a Brown Act issue because you're all here, you're
Yeah.
on TV, it's a public meeting.
We won't
publicly
have any
noticed.
issues there. Yeah.
Is that right?
No, I was confirming that we won't have any Brown Act issues here in chambers.
Theoretically, I think you can open the public hearing, or the public hearing the moment you sit down. It doesn't have to be reserved for specific moments.
I have in the past asked people to hold their questions until the presentation was over. That doesn't mean people are going to do that, and they don't necessarily. We can play with the logistics of the meeting as the time comes closer and we think it through. I think we've kind of.
I think
Do that.
And
We
again,
open
we
them all
can
the time.
formalize it that way to manage the meeting, right? So
Yeah.
you could say, please hold your questions until the end of the presentation, and Jay will try to address all the questions we expect, right? The typical questions that we know are going to come up, like the questions you're giving as examples. So, you know, Jay can address all of those, and then people still, if they missed it and they want to ask it again, they can ask it again, and Jay can respond. Or if
Maybe
there
it
are
just
new
needs to be,
questions.
like,
Or Casey. let's not
Oprah,
forget.
Casey.
maybe it just needs to be Oprah Winfrey style with the microphone, and you're just out there and you're walking up to people, and just the inefficiency
That
of
would
it
be
all.
Casey
seems
walking up on the
It'll be,
microphone.
I think we'll be fine.
I think it would alleviate Jay of having to share the information of what happened in the community with us secondhand, because we weren't there, and impress the public with us listening to them for their buy-in on the importance of the situation overall.
Yeah, I didn't do this selfishly, but that's true. I won't have to do it twice, so.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I've obviously been outnumbered on this one, so let's do it.
What we could do, I'd prefer to go to council with the consensus, but
Mm-hmm.
if you felt really strongly, Chris,
Oh, I see. I need to buy in on it. I just am very concerned with I'm just very concerned with the logistics of a meeting like that. That's all. I'm not opposed to the idea. I don't see how. I've said it enough. I'm very concerned with the logistics of a meeting like that. A, from just a rules and regulation standpoint. B, from a time management standpoint. From whether or not we should be answering questions that someone has for city staff, as much as you like to interrupt things sometimes and correct things or add things. I don't know if it's necessarily important or really even appropriate for us to be engaging in that way, answering city staff
why
questions.
not?
Because we're not city employees, we're not city staff.
But we're
We're the
always.
commission.
We're the commission. We always have public hearings, and we
But if someone comes
respond.
up and says something very logistical like, is there a tax break for my property? That's not something we should be answering a question to,
Jay is
at
going to
least
be,
not in a formal
Jay
setting.
is going to be running the meeting,
Yeah,
so
staff
Jay would
will-
answer that
staff
question,
will
or
lead the
Casey.
discussion. I'm sure some of you will want to weigh in, or if I miss something, fill in the blank. You know, it's going to play, the logistics will play out however it works. And we'll learn from the first one, and hopefully the second one's even better.
And also, several of us bring experience as applicants or as people who went through the process, like in Casa Verdugo, and that's experience that staff doesn't have. And I think that there's value to the input that we could provide. The only other thing I'll say about addressing the bureaucracy, because this may make you feel a little bit better, is there's no reason that people cannot open their mouths until they fill out a card. Something that happens in other in other cities is just you need to fill out a card before you go if you've spoken at the meeting. Yeah, so it's not, it can be handled more informally than, you know, oh, I want to say something, so I'm going to march to the back of the room, fill out my card, and come forward.
It's common, even at DRB, we'll just say, just fill out your card after you speak.
Yeah.
So.
And we can even just announce that at the beginning of the meeting. If you speak, fill out a card. And then.
Right.
All right. Well, great. I'm fine. I still have reservations. However you want to present that to council.
Noted.
Okay, I apologize. I know it's getting late, but may I request a 5-minute break?
Of course.
With me, yes.
Oh, wait, I just said sure. It's up to you.
The chair will entertain a 5-minute break. Thank you.
Okay, let's do the timing at 7:25, so we'll return at 7:30. Okay, we're back, sorry, everyone, we're back on TV, so.
Thank you, everyone. Our timeout has been, expired, and we're back in full session. And we're discussing the possibility of process changes to the code for HPC. Jay, any further items you were looking at for consensus?
Yeah, one of them that I wrote that we'd return to is the idea that when we go to city council with the funding request, if they have a concern about the level of support in the neighborhood, we can build in a step. Again, it's an optional step where they have the ability to ask for the first petition if they want to gauge the level of buy-in from the neighborhood, which I thought we all agreed on. I wrote return next to that. Was there any dissent with that concept?
Yes.
Yes, that's okay.
Okay. And Casey, I'm kind of just going in order, so if I've skipped anything that you have, let me know. We have the idea of mailing all of the DPR forms to the individual property owners, which again becomes an even bigger burden that I didn't think, because we are required to not only go to property owners, but to residents also, which usually, but not necessarily, overlaps. And the way we do that generally is we just double up the mailing, because it's easier than calling the list of absentee owners versus resident owners.
No, I understand that that's
And then
administratively, like, it's a huge process. I understand that. But if we can,
we could do the QR code.
if we
on
can do the
mailing.
QR code, I think just any way we can get people to get there quickly, to the information, or at least entice them to click and see at least what they're looking at, right? Or what they have the opportunity to see.
Okay, I think there's no issue with the QR codes.
Nope.
Be able to do
Everyone's on
that.
board with that?
And then the last one I have, let me read my notes.
The third,
For the extension of a district. If the proponents can't meet the 6-month deadline, we'll shift that to an HPC hearing from a council hearing, which again then gives HPC an opportunity to see if a third HPC meeting might be useful.
That makes sense.
That'll be our call.
Yes.
And that's all I got that seemed to deviate from the proposed steps.
I move to approve your proposed changes.
I'm just going to make a quick comment. I don't know if it's important in the staff report. I know we talked about it, but on page 5, third paragraph, where we say, within 10 business days of the HPC determination, staff will mail a follow-up notice to all affected owners/occupants, informing them of the decision, and if the process moves forward, that historic design guidelines, I think we wanted to say, are in effect for design review while the area is considered a pending historic district.
And which sentence are you on?
Sorry, so third paragraph down from the top,
Right.
and then 1, 2, 3, third line, yeah,
Historic.
right? I think we just want to clarify that we're saying if the process moves forward, historic design guidelines are in effect
Yes,
for
you could-
design
you kind of
review, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Are in
On the typo
effect.
now.
That's great, because I'll be
Can't see.
reusing this staff report for council to some degree, hopefully
Yeah.
streamlining it a little bit. Okay, that's great, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm so,
Okay.
Okay, so,
So the motion was made by Commissioner Craig Noddy to accept change amendment.
Wait,
Oh,
let's
no.
just make the motion to recommend to council the staff proposed streamlining with the 4, or actually, it's only 3,
Effect.
oh no, it's only actually 2. It's QR code and shift the extension. The other 2 things we agreed on. For the extension, or? but that I thought was for. Is that not for the extension? Oh, so city council.
If they don't want to
at the
authorize
time
funding.
At the time of funding.
Right.
Right, okay.
At the time of funding.
Oh, I just wrote okay there, so, okay. CC. Require petition. Option 2, require petition. At funding. Okay, so either HPC can recommend the first petition or city council will also be.
Perfect.
Okay, so with the 3 proposed changes, or to the
Commissioner
main-
Cognati, you're in.
So moved.
Motion to approve the changes recommended for council.
Making this motion?
I am.
Okay. Your voice changed.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say so moved because you were kind
So
of
I'll
saying it.
second.
Okay, so Chris, Lorna, recommend with changes. All right, roll call.
Roll call vote, please.
Is there no further discussion? Is that?
That?
Oh, did you want to discuss
Yeah,
something
I actually,
else?
I just had a couple of questions.
Oh, sure, yeah.
If that's okay. Just in terms of thinking about code language for how we frame the possibility of a third HPC meeting, that's the only area where it seems that this is kind of fuzzy about why we might need it and when the HPC could initiate a third meeting. My own feeling, having gone through these 1, 2, 3 meetings, I'm not sure under what circumstances a third HPC meeting would be necessary apart from a substantial problem with the survey that needed to
The
be.
main reason that I see it.
Okay.
It could be a general concern to just be more transparent with the community if there is significant opposition. It could be, if someone is circulating an opposition petition, that would be the time we would have to present that to council or to HPC to indicate whether they met the threshold that the city charter requires for an opposition petition.
Okay.
So, yeah, I
Okay,
can think
that-
of a couple.
Okay,
The
that-
one that I hadn't actually thought of that last one, but
Yeah.
I did think if we just really screwed up with our consultant choice and got a dismal product, I can't imagine that happening.
Yeah.
And then Jay, on page 3 of the staff report, it says, so all HPC comments and recommendations will be included in the staff report that council will tentatively consider in October or November. Based on council's direction, staff will prepare revisions to the municipal code for review by HPC and the planning commission. So we'll have an opportunity to review the ordinance again.
Yeah, when I wrote that, I presumed that there's no requirement that HPC review the code language. I would recommend that we just go the normal way of planning commission and you're basically, everything we're talking about here is just gonna be turned into wonky code language. If you read it and realized that we had made an error, we can correct that at either the planning commission or the council hearing.
Okay, yeah, I guess there's an opportunity, there's 2 more.
Shaving a step off that review process. And it's unusual, we don't go to design review board if we're changing something in chapter 3047. We don't necessarily go to the body that actually is responsible for that code section.
Right.
Because there's no expectation that board and commission members have any expertise in writing code language. And it's also vetted heavily by the city attorney before we bring it to the public hearing.
Okay, that's fine. Again, our tweaks are small. My only thoughts are that concerns from the community in the past that with North Glendale Community Plan, certain things didn't make it into the code, but we're only doing some small things, some
Well,
small
that-
tweaks. So
that's-
we would have an opportunity at planning.
Yeah, and those concerns may be things that shouldn't be put in code. There's policy and there's code. And there's certain things that are policy level discussions. Some of my colleagues were like, why are you putting any timelines in here? And so the language we're going to use is
Oh,
going to be a little
understood.
softer.
Yeah, no, that's understood.
And, yeah, so,
I mean, you don't
know,
want to
we're
codify
pretty
your
good.
timelines.
you know, some cities don't even codify this process. When you look at 3025-030, that's long, longer than any other kind of code section. And it goes to the level of detail of talking about who can sign a petition with 5 different options or something. It's there has been talk that we shouldn't even codify this, but because we have previously, the decision that we made at the higher staff level was to continue doing that because we've had it and it would be
Right.
weird to kind of change it now.
Okay, that's fine. I just saw it in the staff report, so I wanted to ask.
Yeah, when I wrote the staff report, I kind of had that as an open question that I didn't get answered by the time I needed to put it out. so.
I have one final question, and this actually goes to the issue of petition signatures. And before I ask that question, because we haven't had an opportunity to make general comments, I just want to say I think you did a terrific job. I'm so pleased with this. And when I was imagining, like, what would I cut? What would I change? Like, I didn't get to this, I think, just really kind of brilliant level of consolidation and eliminating things that just seemed to me duplicative and unnecessary. So I think
That's very nice to hear. Thank you.
yes, you are welcome.
Ditto.
Thank you.
Thank you. We take you for granted, Jay. No, really.
Never.
Every night
And I don't mean to interrupt you, but I've said this before, and I've complimented you on meetings we've been in, with CPF or whatever it might be. And I think we're very well supported here in the city of Glendale, and due largely to everything that Jay puts together for us and all the thought that goes into these processes and reports. And thank you so much.
Of course, thank you.
That was my conclusion. I was wait till after the vote, but Catherine stole my line that.
Sorry.
No, I'm all in favor of streamlining and anything less bureaucratic, all the better. And this was actually for reading government work, a joy to read.
That
Thank you.
said, she still has a question.
I apologize for interrupting.
Absolutely not, though. I interrupted myself with the praise. So my question had to do with the signatures, and it's interesting that you talked about, like, to what degree should things get codified, and we've got, all these different senses of what constitutes a valid signature. One thing that occurred to me is there a way in the process to count but note when not all property owners have signed? Because I had situations where a couple was divorced and one spouse lived in the house, her husband was on the other side of the country, and they're not tracking down his signature. One where a woman told me, I am the sole owner of this house. It turns out the city told me, no, she's got this brother. There are people who are estranged. We have trust. And I think, I don't know exactly what that would look like, but it seems to me that we don't simply just want to treat this as nothing. If the property owner who resides at the house signs the petition, even if, it's better to have both signatories or all 5 or whatever it is. So is there a mechanism for presenting this information to council? We got this many full signatures, we got this many, at least one property owner.
Yeah, there's no reason not to do that. I think they're obligated to only count the number of the full signatures. But if it's an effort to show, hey, we've got this great level of support and it's even more, except we've had these kind of weird situations. We had it with Royal Boulevard. It was very strange because there was an opposition petition that was circulated. And if I remember correctly, from start to finish, that took not as long as some of our recent ones, but still a while. There was a couple that split up. There was a house that sold where the previous owner did not sign the opposition petition, but the new owner supported the district. The city attorney, we kind of brought that to the city attorney, who said, no, we have to go with the signatures on the petition. So when we went to council, we did note that, the number of properties that now supported,
Yeah.
they didn't make it into account.
Yeah. I mean,
Which could have a psychological benefit rather than legal one.
We absolutely did that for Ross Moyne too. When we did the final presentation, I just had it all mapped out because again, for all of those reasons, you're gonna learn so many things about your neighborhood. There are gonna be a lot of
yeah.
homes that are rentals. There are gonna be a lot of elderly people who just never answer the door. There are going to be couples who disagree. The husband supports, the wife doesn't, or whatever the scenario is. There are going to be homes that have 5 owners. So, you're going to have to pick and choose what you're going to have to overlook, and as long as you get your percentages. But I think it's important to let council know why you didn't get 100%. I mean, nobody gets 100%, but it's not because those people don't support. There are so many other reasons why people can't sign, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
and
We're fairly realistic when we review the signatures. I've had a number of situations where a spouse has died and the person actually writes out deceased. I imagine that's pretty hard for them to do if it's fresh. And I accept that. I am not going, but then we had proponents in, I think it was Casa Verdugo, who were asking people for death certificates, which themselves are, and they just did it. I got some death certificates, and I know those are actually expensive documents to if it's the original, and it's so we don't go that far. We accept the line that says, "I swear under penalty of perjury that the below information is correct." The times we do, we look at the signatures to see if they're from a different hand. We want to try to be as careful as we can. But ultimately, I don't remember this thing with the brother because we don't necessarily go line by line through the ownership records because the things we get from the county assessor are so often out of date. So especially, 6 months between a new buyer getting into the record the rolls. So we're fairly realistic about that.
okay. right,
But we
thanks.
could note it if the proponents keep track of that and want to share that information, we'll share it.
Okay, well, good. I think having just a kind of informal process by which that could happen would be beneficial.
As far as I know, we're the only city that I've found that does it the way we do. Most people do a number of people signing the petition, where we do it by property and then expect the full ownership to sign. So leave it to Glenda.
I was going to say, well, because you said we have to require this. And I was thinking, no, we don't have to require it. We can come up with our own system. But I find that unlikely to be changed in Glendale.
Maybe you could slip that in. Slip that into the streamline thing.
Ultimately,
See what happens.
Ultimately, the proponents have figured it out in every
Yeah.
case, and we were pretty fluid with accepting electronic signatures during the pandemic, and so we had
Right.
yet another easier way to reach some of the people who are harder to reach.
Yeah.
So
It's easier to track, in my experience, by property. It just is, because a lot of times you'll go to a home and, the second signatory is not available. So you know which one you already have and where you need to go back. So it's, yeah.
okay,
Okay.
so we've had our little interlude. Now we can go back. We have a motion on the table and a second. Cargnati and Vartanian. I'll do a roll call. Commissioner Yurka,
Yes.
Commissioner Morgan,
Yes.
Commissioner Vartanian,
Yes.
Cargnati.
Yes.
Chair Doom.
Yes.
Okay, we will recommend this process to City Council, and we'll get there as soon as we can.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jay.
Great.
Great job. Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you for all our input on writing
do-
code. This is
do have
kind of
to-
cool.
The formality of the additional items, you already read that item 7B has been continued
They have been continued.
till the hearing of October 20th, 2022. And then the update about historic district design review is also continued to that date without any realistic promise that we'll be able to pull that off. But we're going to keep it on the agenda until we get it done. So, and we will make sure to have all 5 in attendance. So.
All right.
I
With
did-
no other further items on our agenda,
I actually would, under update, I would like an update. You mentioned that which is big news and news to me about the Northwest Glendale surveys. I'm sorry, the East-West is going to be an East-West-North, which I think is terrific. Do we know where that is in process?
Yeah, the RFPs was being worked on, and this kind of supplanted that.
Okay,
I think the RFP will go out in October.
great.
I've committed to having it out by the end of the year. I think I can do better than that. So.
That's great. And the one thing that I wanted to put out there is I remember with the South Glendale survey that the HPC was not given the opportunity to review the methodology. And I think it's really important that we participate in that process before the actual on-the-ground surveying is done.
Okay. Yeah, well, I'll discuss that with everyone. I can't
Sure,
commit to
sure.
that right now, but I don't see why not. It builds up, we'd have to put that in the RFP because the consultant would have to attend the hearing. We've never done it before. So I'll put it, take it under advisement, so. And we have to remember this one. Not that we
I
don't
will
have to
email you.
remember everything that I put a star next to in my notes, but,
Just a quick actual question about that. Is that, do you maybe want a consensus from the commission as to whether or not that's something we all feel like we want to be a part of?
that's the chair's discretion.
Oh, okay.
But sure, yeah.
I mean, I feel like at
if-
council, there has to be 2 people that ask for something usually, isn't
No,
that how it goes?
I guess it would be useful because it is a step that would add time and cost to the survey by adding another public meeting.
The only cost it would add is the consultant coming,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
There was a lot of dissatisfaction from the community with the methodology that was used in the South Glendale Historic Resources Survey. And I know this as someone who was active in TGHS on the board at the time. And none of that could get aired in advance. It was, the survey was done, and then we had the methodology. And the methodology determines what you identify as historic resources. So it's not something that you can review when you have the list of historic resources that have been identified. It's too late at that point. So it's, I mean, I just don't see that there's any question that the HPC should not review this document. I would think that would be completely standard.
I don't remember a lot of stuff, but I don't remember the community expressing maybe.
TGHS was very unhappy, and speaking for TGHS, I was speaking, or whoever was speaking for the board, was speaking for 600-800 members. That was, I mean, you remember the huge issues regarding properties that
I was going to
were
ask,
missed.
yeah, what was the, what, do you remember specifically what part of the methodology?
The issue, I have to say this publicly, the issue with properties that were missed, properties were not missed. I made a huge mistake on that survey by bringing it to HPC multiple times earlier than the surveyors were finished with their work. And that was a huge mistake in hindsight. And I thought it was the right thing to do, and it led to significant problems and significant issues with regard to discussions about the quality of the survey and the surveyors, the firm that did that work. I stand behind their work and their methodology. I don't think it's a bad idea, but I have to say that the concern that properties were missed at the time was solely a result of too early a review and a very,
That's,
all I'll say.
that seems perfectly reasonable, and I'm willing to accept that. However, the separate issue
No, I understand what
was
you're
the
saying.
methodology. And so, if there are disagreements about the methodology, those properties haven't been missed. They've just been discounted from the beginning. So I don't want to have a battle about the methodology, but I think it's important for a survey that will include the entire east, the entire west, and the entire north of Glendale for the HPC to have, like, I don't think we even just should have the chance. I think we have the obligation to provide feedback on this important document that, that TGHS, for example, has been asking for, as 6 years. So I will reach out.
Survey's been requested for decades.
Yeah, well, that
We're gonna
too,
get
but
very
I will
close,
reach out to my council members to suggest how important this is, but I just think that we have to review the methodology, because the methodology determines what gets identified as historic.
If anyone else wants to weigh in on that, I hear what you're saying, and I don't necessarily disagree, but we have relied on the professional judgment of consultants in all of our surveys to develop these, and staff, of course, vets it. And like I said, I stand behind the methodology. I don't think there were significant things overlooked.
So when,
Survey, there's room for disagreement about what is significant and what isn't. And I think for the East-West survey in particular, we're going to look really hard when we're talking about what Spanish colonial houses rise to the level of Glendale Register in a neighborhood that is chock-a-block full of really nice examples. Well, we have to develop a methodology that figures out a way to truly assess those at the highest level, and that's going to be a really interesting process, but it's going to be different than what we did for South Glendale, and so.
I agree.
I hear you,
yeah.
and we can certainly build that into the process if either your colleagues here want to talk about it a little more. It's not agendized, so I don't think we should be making any decision tonight. If you want to talk to council members who can ask us to make sure that happens, I'm sure that will happen. So.
well, I wouldn't mind seeing what the methodology is going to be. I don't know.
Actually, if we need to agendize this, we've probably talked more about an unagendized item than we should.
Let's agendize it and just in general talk about, how we select the consultant, and different consultants, as you said, use different methodologies, and
And
so,
I'll also look at best practices of, do other cities do this? I'll talk to consultants, I'll talk to some colleague cities.
Great.
and We'll do together, Casey and I will do some background research to inform the discussion.
great.
And I think it would be helpful to know specifically what specific methodology, elements of the methodology they were uncomfortable with, I guess, would be very helpful.
I don't think it matters. I think because it was specific to South Glendale. I think what matters is that they were annoyed that it didn't come to HPC. There was no possibility for public discussion of what the methodology is. The methodology, as Jay's pointing out, for East, West, and North Glendale will be completely different.
The methodology is also assessed after in a survey, especially of this scope, there are two components. There's a very broad brush initial survey where they just say what's out there, and that's when the methodology is developed. By the time they're surveying individual properties, they need to have the methodology in place.
For our outline.
So it's a tricky process to
Well, it's not, because it's two phases. I mean, so I think the point is that once the methodology is done, that we should review it and comment on it.
yes,
Yeah.
of course, it's
Okay.
just
So it will be
Yeah.
agendized for the foreseeable future.
Well, so just one more question is, if it has to be part of the RFP, does this hold up the RFP if we're going to agendize this I don't see why
meeting
we,
on October 20th.
Okay.
And we do have to wait for the RFP. This has to be part of it.
Okay.
They have to build in another public meeting, so. But, you know, we can hopefully make that question, you know, get the research done before October 20th, and at least give you some information about how this is done by other consultants and other cities, and see how much public input is brought into methodology development. My guess is it's very rare. And if council directs us to do it, why not? Glendale's different on so many other levels. We can be on this as well. But there is the story about the cooks, the number of cooks, and all that. So.
Well, but I think the HPC is the appropriate, you know, maybe there will be no members of the public, maybe it'll be, but I would like to get a look at it before we get a list of the resources.
Any more Lieutenant Colombo questions? One more thing?
No. I was just going to say, I'm happy to have you bring it back and see what happens elsewhere. And
No. We'll
Talk
we'll
more
put
about
it on. We'll put it on the October agenda. There's no reason not to.
thank you.
And it could
Be
delay
prepared
the
for a
RFP
long
little
night,
bit,
Chris.
but at least it won't be our fault.
All right. So
Okay,
noted.
so we are. Everything else is rescheduled. We're all set.
And we are adjourned at 8:01 p.m. Thank you all for attending. We'll see you in October.
Thank you.